All right, happy summer. We'll call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. The first agenda item, additions and deletions. I don't believe there are any. So no additions to deletions. So the next agenda item is a public hearing regarding our draft discharge permit for wastewater. This is a required public meeting, and we have state representatives, not representatives, but from DEC and whatnot, who will present an overview of the permit, I assume, and be available to ask questions or answer questions from the audience. And I think the select board will move down and will allow you folks to come up. That seem all right? All right, and we have 2 hours slated, so there's plenty of time for the presentation, questions, and answers. Good.
So this is on. Let's see how. Hello. My name is Jessica Bulova. I'm from the Vermont State DEC, Agency of Natural Resources with the wastewater program. And we are here this evening to hold a meeting in regards to comments on the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination Systems, more commonly referred to as the NPDS draft permit for Hinesburg. And we are recording this meeting as we are apparently also on TV. So we're going to start with a brief introduction about the Lake Champlain TMDL and then jump into the changes in the draft permit from the current permit and then open the floor for comments or questions. We do have a sign-in sheet. If you could please sign in, we would appreciate that. And also we have a proposed permit overview informational sheet that is helpful as we go through some of the changes in this draft permit. And the comment period for this permit closes on July 28th. You are welcome to submit comments via email or mail, and the address is on the front of the informational sheet. Once we do start taking comments, we ask that you please come up and talk into the microphone, and also please state your name. And we will do our best to address comments this evening. However, in some cases, we will not be able to answer all questions. We'll need to refer to documents and our resources. But all of those questions and comments will be in the response summary, which will be on public record. We may also ask that you submit your comment or question in writing, just so we thoroughly understand what it is you're asking. So from there, I'll jump right into a very brief spiel on Lake Champlain TMDL, which is the Lake Champlain Total Maximum Daily Load. It was adopted in June of 2016, and the Phase 1 implementation plan was adopted in September of 2016. The TMDL is a pollution budget that describes the amount of pollution a water body can tolerate and still maintain water quality standards. It is the sum of the point discharges, non-point discharges, a margin of safety, and allocation for growth. There are 59 facilities that fall under this TMDL for phosphorus, Hinesburg being one of them, as it discharges to the La Platte River, which then flows directly into Lake Champlain. We do have a couple of additional informational sheets on the TMDL itself. Please help yourselves to those. I'm sorry? Oh, there you go. That's nice they posted it. That's a good location. Yes. The current Hinesburg NPDES permit became effective in October of 2005 and expired in September of 2010, at which point it was administratively continued in anticipation of this most recent TMDL. And with that, I will turn it over to Amy.
Hi, my name's Amy Polacek. I am also in the wastewater program with the Vermont State DEC. I wrote the permit for this facility with the help of my colleagues. And As Jessica said, this facilities permit has been administratively continued for many years, and because of that, there are several changes that have been proposed in the current draft permit. I'll be going through these on the handout that's available on the table, the proposed permit overview. Because of the Lake Champlain TMDL, the total phosphorus limit is being proposed to be reduced by 75% from a limit of 608 pounds annually to 152 pounds annually. Also, because of the impairment of the La Platte River, the plant will now, the facility will now be, is proposed, excuse me, to have a new total ammonia nitrogen limit, and that changes based on the season because ammonia changes its toxicity based on temperature and pH. And so that would include a compliance schedule, or that does include a compliance schedule, including the town to submit a plan by December 31st, 2018 to propose any potential upgrades to the plant that may need to be undertaken in order to meet those nitrogen limits. And in the interim, the plant will have a monitoring requirement for a total ammonia nitrogen, but the facility will need to achieve compliance by December 31st, 2021 with the permit limits that are proposed in the draft permit. Another change from the previous permit is the total residual chlorine. Chlorine is used to disinfect the effluent prior to discharge into the river, but it is also something that is dangerous for aquatic life, and the reduction in that is from 1 milligram per liter down to 0.02 milligrams per liter, which is the detection limit for chlorine residual. Finally, there's an in-stream water quality monitoring requirement that has been suggested by our monitoring group for turbidity, total phosphorus, and pH in the La Platte River from June through October of 2018, 19, and 20. There's also a collection system, operations, maintenance, and emergency response plan due by December 31st, 2017, and an engineering evaluation due by December 31st, 2019 for any component of the plant that is not being upgraded due to the compliance schedule for the ammonia.
Okay. Mary, did you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Mary Borg. I'm Deputy Director of the Watershed Management Division, which houses the wastewater program. Thanks, everyone, for coming tonight. You'll recognize that there are a number of changes proposed in the permit and the limits. These sorts of changes will be occurring in varying degrees in the other permits for the 59 facilities that are impacted by the Lake Champlain TMDL. Hinesburg is not alone in terms of facing potential upgrades. There will be also other facilities. When these permits have been expired for a long time and administratively continued, not just in Hinesburg, but other places, because of the time it's taken with the revocation of the former Lake Champlain TMDL and then the new one, which took a lot of time. So these 59 facilities throughout the Champlain Basin had their permits administratively continued. So now that we've gone back in and we're beginning to look at those permits, there are 10 in this slug of permits this year, we're doing an analysis of permit requirements and adding new requirements based on the TMDL, as well as something called a reasonable potential determination. When we go back to facilities, we look at all of the monitoring data the near-field monitoring data, such as in the La Platte in this case, and we determine whether or not, given all of the monitoring data, we've analyzed whether or not there's a reasonable potential to exceed water quality standards. And that reasonable potential determination we did this time for the Hinesburg plant has shown that there is an ammonia issue. And that is why, and that's based on several rounds of sampling that have happened in the La Platte River since the last permit. So that's really what's driving these new requirements around that. Just so you have a little bit of background, because it looks like a lot has changed. In addition, there are more stringent monitoring requirements, and those likewise are going to be asked from all of the facilities out there, as well as optimization of phosphorus controls across all of these 59 facilities to try to squeeze the best phosphorus reduction out of the plants.
And if I could just clarify one of the points that I made about the ammonia, that is not being required because of impairment of the La Platte River, but because of the Vermont water quality standards and the criteria in the EPA ammonia criteria.
Okay, I guess we can open it up for comments. If you would please step up and state your name, if you have any comments or questions.
Just so you know, comments are really important to us. We really do look at them, and we change documents. We change permits, we change reports, plans, based on public comment. So it really is important to us. We go back, we have a lot of conversations around comments. This is a very technical document, so for those of you who have technical comments, in addition to making comments tonight, if you want to write down more detailed comments and send them in, that would be fantastic for us.
Phil Pouch, I'm a resident of Hinesburg, happen to be the chair of the select board too. And if we go back to that pie chart, it's sort of, for me anyways, the elephant in the room. And there's no question that Lake Champlain is under stress from pollutants, and phosphorus is clearly a key one. And, you know, our town plant is designed to remove phosphorus, but now you're looking at an ammonia limit 2, which our plant is not designed to do. So now we'll be forced to redesign the plant, invest upwards to $10 million. And if you look at where the phosphorus is coming from, if we were to take $8 million and apply it elsewhere, it seems to me you'd get a much better bang for the buck. And it feels like you're coming after easy targets with permits and, you know, leaving the elephant in the room, which are other non-point sources. And if you have, how many plants? 56?
59.
59 plants, and I'm going to guess every one of them is going to have an investment, and many of them will have significant investments to meet that criteria. If you were to take that amount of money and apply it elsewhere, I just wonder if you wouldn't get better and more efficient results rather than sort of squeezing the last 20% out of a plant that's already run fairly efficiently based on its design. And now we'll need to maybe throw that plant out the window and have to come up with a brand new plant with a new design. And having a short period of time to do that would be a significant impact to the users, which is a small amount of Hinesburg that is on that wastewater treatment system. I think that's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Andrea Morgan, Hinesburg resident, select board member. I was wondering if you could just explain
why the nitrogen ammonia component is being added, not just because EPA, but exactly what its effect is on the river and why it has become a criteria, and whether there are any ways to mitigate or things that we can do on the front end so that we aren't dealing with it when it gets to the wastewater treatment plant. So, tell us about it.
Sure. So ammonia nitrogen is a very strong aquatic pollutant because it is toxic at very low levels to aquatic biota, plants and fish. And so the issue there is that at this particular location, the wastewater treatment plant has an in-stream waste concentration, so you can consider it the percentage of the stream where the effluent from the wastewater treatment plant is coming in is 55%, roughly. So that at that high concentration of wastewater effluent, the issue is that creates a very strong possibility for impairment of the stream when it comes to an ammonia concentration. And so that is the driver behind the ammonia limits.
So 55% of the ammonia is coming from the treatment plant, 45% is already...
No, sorry, let me
Okay.
clarify then.
Yep.
In the river, as it passes by, looking at the water at the end of the pipe for the treatment plant, 55% of the water is from the treatment plant and 45% is actually the river.
Oh, okay.
So because of that large in-stream waste concentration, we call it, we have a strong potential for pollution from ammonia. And the limits are driven also by the chronic criteria, which is the constant exposure criteria, as one would expect. And that limit is much lower than the acute criteria, because a fish that would be always swimming in that spot, being always exposed to that nitrogen, ammonia nitrogen, cannot be exposed to such a high concentration over time. Please, Eric.
Eric Bailey, Utilities Director, Chief Operator of the wastewater plant. Just kind of continuing on this, 55, 45, just from practice, you know how you can tell where my outfall is in the river?
Where all the fish are.
Exactly. There's this dense cloud of fish that love my 55% the way it is. So, I'm not sure.
I'm Rob Bast, I'm a citizen. And I read very quickly this morning, I've just skimmed the information. It was the first time I heard about the hearing tonight, or focused on it at least. And it seemed that there were different facilities in different parts of the watershed that were being treated somewhat differently based on where they entered into the Lake Champlain. So, and do I understand correctly that Hinesburg is being given, among the towns, that is being given extra attention on these limits because it discharges into Shelburne Bay? Are there specific points that you're trying to reduce as opposed to necessarily reducing the overall watershed?
That is correct. The TMDL does set up different allocations for each of the basins. So depending on where in the lake the final discharge is from the river, it does have
different limits set for waste load allocations.
I just want to say that I served on this board for pretty close to 20 years and was involved in a number of these hearings and over the years for permitting hearings back a couple of decades ago. And I just want to illustrate the progress that's being made. That the first hearing that I ran with people from the state coming in talking about the permit, there was an older gentleman in the back of the room who talking about, and the state was talking about lack of progress and I know we have new rules and everything now, but he stood up and he said, "Why, I remember when this river ran black all the way to Shelburne Bay." And I just want to bring that up for historical perspective because there has been a lot of progress. Hinesburg has always worked hard to make this facility as good as it can be. But I want to echo Phil Pouch's comments that up until this point, the cost of this has been borne by the users. And it's an enterprise account. And throwing a $10 million cost, pick a number out of a hat, onto the cost of the water here is a tough pill to bear for the town, especially if there's no potential for growth in the facility. Going back to his comments about we're contributing 4% of the phosphorus. Is the money better spent elsewhere? And I think we're all interested in the quality of the water and the quality of the lake. But we're also interested in, government advocating for effective use of limited resources, as well as the protection of limited resources. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could you explain what the penalties are if we don't comply? What will happen? The sequence of events. If we, the process that we'll have to go through is design and engineering and then a bond. And if voters don't approve it, we don't have the resources to do this. What's the sequence of events that will happen if we're not in compliance?
Well, if a permit is issued and the permittee doesn't comply, we do have the option as an agency to take an enforcement action, which ends up in court, with usually a negotiated schedule. So at this point, we are hoping, and we're open to comment on this, but we've proposed a 5-year schedule for the town to make any necessary upgrades. And hopefully, I don't know how the bonding works or the time frames, I'm not savvy that way, but hopefully that would give enough time for planning. I'm already seeing head shaking, bonding and the actual upgrades. We try to work with the towns. It's really not in our best interest or your best interest or the interest of townspeople and the taxpayers to enter into enforcement. We always, as a first route, hope to work it out cooperatively with the towns. And that's, your comments are important to us. We don't want to come in and just start an enforcement action. It doesn't do anybody any good. And it costs a lot of legal fees. So we hope we can work together on this. And if the town does need a longer schedule, it should let us know now.
We've maybe a little ahead of the curve because we've had some studies done. We spent a good amount of money looking at how we would increase capacity. Is that possible? Because the town has the potential to grow more. And also, how are we doing with our permit now, and what technologies are we going to need in the future? And what our consultants came back with was this ammonia issue, and the fact that our treatment system right now, lagoon system, is totally incapable of doing anything about the ammonia. And so with that change would require different technology, a different system. And at the time where we had, discussions about it, we were under the assumption that ammonia is coming down the pike, but that it would be not until the next permit, that we would have some time to do this. But now what we see is it, in fact, did come into this permit, and I think we were surprised it came in. And now we're sort of shaking our head about what we're going to do about it. So maybe we feel a little, I'll say, uninformed, or I might even say misled about that. So, finding that out just recently in the last few weeks, couple weeks, was a real shock, I think. And so now that's sort of like a double whammy, that, we know we're going to have to, we cannot meet these permit limits on the best of days. And now we don't even have the technology to meet the ammonia limits. So this is a big shock, and it's going to be a big shock to this town, and it's going to be very, very difficult to do. And I'm not saying we don't want to do it,
Right.
but these kind of 75% reduction in phosphorus is a big change. And so a change like that really would be best applied over a period of time, a significant amount of time, so that, again, the people on the system, who are the ratepayers, and there are a limited amount of people, have the ability to absorb that, and perhaps we have the ability to grow as a town and add more users, and we can plan the impact to our budget. But this feels like it's going to be a real hard shock. And
Well, based on the information we had at the time we proposed the permit, and this is why public meetings are great, we had understood that Hinesburg could meet these new limits in 5 years. If that's not true, the way this can play out, and has been used for other facilities, is we issue a 5-year permit, which is what we do under, which is the requirement under federal law, which we implement in Vermont. We issue a 5-year permit, but we have a compliance schedule in an accompanying order, which goes beyond the 5 years. So it gives the permittee more time to do the work it needs to do outside of the confines of that 5-year permit. It sounds like a strange arrangement, but it works. And that has been done in Vermont, and it's also done by the federal government. They give you the 5-year permit with that accompanying schedule. And that schedule is something that, it's in the context of enforcement, it's an order, but it's a compliance schedule that the state or the feds work out through discussions and negotiations and a better understanding with the permittee. So if the town feels that it cannot make that 5 years, then we should get into those discussions as to what you really need to make it work.
when would those discussions start, and how long would they go on?
Well, we
And-
could,
and
Right.
You know, so I think what you're saying is the permit would come, however it.
Well, we don't know. We
should
wouldn't want to
resolve.
issue the permit and then have you knowing you're going to fail. We would want to get into conversations with you right away so that when the permit was issued, it could have this longer-term compliance schedule in this accompanying order.
Okay, well, I
So we
mean,
could start those discussions next week if you want.
Right, okay. I mean, I think you're gonna have a lot of people in our position, I'm guessing,
Well,
other
you know,
towns.
We actually thought we would, and this round with the 10 that are the first ones out, we haven't had that situation with the need for this long-term compliance schedule. Surprisingly, we know we're going to be there with other towns, though.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Hey.
Tom Ayers, my name. I'm also a select board member. I'm going to go back to the pie chart. I'm going to echo what Rob and Phil both said. And I'm wondering if a cost-benefit analysis has been done at any point, because I think, as Phil has mentioned, it's going to be a significant financial burden on this town for what seems to be a very limited benefit to the lake. I mean, if I look at this chart, I'm seeing forest lands are 4 times the amount of phosphorus as a sewage plant. I don't know where ammonia sits in there or nitrogen, but I can only imagine it's similar. I would like to see those numbers. I think if you're talking about a town this size spending upwards of $10 million, there should be at least a benefit shown to the taxpayers, the residents of the town.
The phosphorus requirement is driven by the TMDL. The ammonia nitrogen requirement is driven by the near-field impact of the plant in the La Platte River. So those are 2 separate things. There are other facilities out there that are also having similar near-field ammonia issues in the right in the immediate receiving water also. In terms of the conversations around the Lake Champlain TMDL and that chart, there were a lot of very vigorous conversations during the time that it was put together about the best bang for the buck and where was the best place for the taxpayers of Vermont as a state and as towns to spend their money.
So how did you settle on the 4% that's shown here?
Well, this was, I mean, I don't want to pass the buck, but this was EPA's TMDL. But the way the TMDL is written, there are point sources, ends of pipes, like wastewater treatment plants and stormwater is also considered that under this TMDL. There are also the more diffuse discharges called non-point sources, such as from forestry and agriculture. The TMDL was conceived as an all-in approach. So there are new requirements on everybody in this pie chart. There are new required agricultural practices, which are going to cost farmers a lot of money. There are requirements on the forestry industry, which will also require investments. The position of anyone with a NIPDES permit, either wastewater or stormwater permit, is that they have to comply with the assumptions of the TMDL, that the number you get in Hinesburg for phosphorus reduction. Your permits become the hook by which those phosphorus requirements in the TMDL are implemented. And there's no way out of that. And I know in terms of bang for the buck, I hear what you're saying, but those conversations had happened when this was put together. Not that we're not hearing them now, we're hearing them from everybody. The farmers themselves also are faced with high costs, and they're not happy with it. But we did try, and we, in order to get approval of the TMDL, we had to give EPA had to feel there was reasonable assurances that we were also requiring investments and reductions from everyone in the pie chart, not just the wastewater plants and the stormwater plants. Mm-hmm. So there are those costs being borne by other sectors.
Right, I understand, but
But I do hear
As a
you.
selectman who's trying to put together a budget and be responsible to
Mm-hmm.
the people using the system, there's only so much people can afford. And I think when the rubber hits the road in paying for these things, you're probably going to see a much greater pushback than you are at these meetings.
We anticipate,
Right.
yeah.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, no, I'm back. And it's actually to defend you, believe it or not. So I was involved with, during all the discussions as this was developed. And just in the DEC's defense, they did work to try to add a little common sense compared to what EPA was pushing them. But, they also have to, cave to EPA in order to keep primacy. So, because EPA could just say, yeah, you're out, we're in. So, that's kind of where the cookie crumbles. All right.
Thank you.
Mary, I just wanted to expand on your Phil's comment a little bit about some further discussion with the limits, because I think we all understand the town doesn't expect they're going to be able to comply with either the lower ammonia limit or the lower phosphorus limit. So what latitude do you guys have schedule-wise? Does that mean an extension of the comment period? Does those discussions happen, or can they happen after the comment period's closed? Because it sounds like there's an opportunity for some more discussion here before the permit's issued, because we don't want the permit issued, obviously, with some kind of further discussion here.
You don't want
'cause
to
it-
issue a permit that you're going to fail
Yeah,
at.
none of
It
us-
doesn't help anybody.
Yeah. So what's the process, or what could happen here, I guess, going forward?
What we would do is let the comment period end,
Okay.
and then we would look at the comments submitted by the town.
Yeah.
We would evaluate it and then open up discussions.
Okay. So that is possible with the town after the comment period's closed? Okay. Right. Okay. Right. What's the timeline or schedule, I
And
guess?
Now, just one thing, and then if we recraft the permit, so it includes this longer compliance schedule, it'll have to go back out on public notice again.
Okay.
So a time schedule, I don't know,
Okay.
as soon as we can.
Okay.
We don't want it to
Okay.
languish.
Okay. Thank you.
So you're just hearing us kind of in a narrative way explain that we think we're going to have trouble meeting this. So what data do we need to present to you to back up what we're saying in terms of our ability to, meet the requirements of the permit? I mean, I expect, Aldrich and Elliott have prepared some cost estimates and stuff back last winter and spring. But, so I'm just wondering what we need to get together to
Yeah.
have a more productive discussion
I don't have
on
a
how
s-
we would move forward. So,
I guess I can't say there's a set formula for what you should provide. Just explain what you're telling us today in terms of timing,
In a
costs,
letter?
bonding, et cetera, in comments. Yes.
okay. And include the reports that we've done thus far?
If that helps your case and yeah.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Peter Erb. I'm a citizen here. I'd just like to clarify a couple things. We keep talking about phosphorus, but it seems to me like the ammonia is really going to be the huge expense. So no matter what we do with the phosphorus, we're still faced with having to deal with this expense for ammonia. And now, my next question is, I understand that in the pie chart, you're taking all those segments and demanding more from them. But it might be possible as a town to reduce our phosphorus and possibly the ammonia, I don't know, beyond what you may be requiring there. Is there any way to get a credit for that or anything, or are we locked into this one way of thinking?
Can you clarify a little? I'm not sure if you're asking if the users of the wastewater treatment facility could lessen their ammonia and phosphorus? The whole town?
I mean, if we could reduce the phosphorus coming out of our forests by whatever amount that would balance what you're trying to do that, or if we could find, Andrea asked whether there was an uploading way to deal with the ammonia. There may not be, but you know, I think with these large expenses, we really want to be able to think as creatively as we can here, and I just don't know how much latitude we may have in the regulatory process.
Yeah, it would be great if you submitted that comment. I don't have the final answer on that today. I know we've been talking with Burlington also about that, where they have been discussing why should we be squeezing these pounds of phosphorus out of the plant for X amount of dollars, where maybe we could do some stormwater controls over here and get the same equivalent phosphorus reduction in a faster and more cost-effective manner. It's a trading concept, and I know that the TMDL does speak to Vermont having flexibility around that sort of effort, but we haven't launched that effort or had any concrete conversations with the town around it. But if you could submit a comment on that, then we can get back to you and maybe have further discussions around it.
May I ask one more question?
Sure.
Yeah. The loads in the other part of the pie chart, the reductions, are you doing a numerical reduction where you know the forests have 10 pounds and you want it to be 8 pounds? Or, for example, or are you doing sort of a percentage reduction from those other sources, the non-point sources? How are you measuring that?
Well, each sector has a certain reduction amount that it has to reach. But it's not as if we're requiring each plot of forest to reduce by the same amount. Some of it's going to be opportunities, and we will be adding up different phosphorus reduction activities in those sectors until they meet this reduction percentage.
I mean, the only reason I'm asking that is this town has made a real attempt to be reasonably environmentally responsible. You know, we're very active with Lewis Creek Association. We've done, you know, we're talking about the La Platte, unfortunately, not Lewis Creek, but they also are involved with the La Platte, you know, and we're constantly working on you know, river instability for whatever, and floodplains and wetlands and all of that. And we've done that for years, and we get, I don't know whether you get any credit for that or not, or whether we're just now, well, this is where you are. And
We have set up, one of the requirements under the TMDL from EPA, as well as the fact we want to know how we're doing with reductions, we are setting up quite an intricate tracking system, which is going to be tracking any of these reduction projects across the watersheds and keeping track of them so that we can document to EPA that, yes, we are meeting these reductions.
thank you.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Randy Bean. I'm a retired agency employee. To the best of my knowledge, I'm the longest serving member of the wastewater management program. I'm now a consultant. I've been contracted by the town along with Wayne Elliott of A&E Engineering to provide comments on behalf of the town on the draft permit, the fact sheet, and the reasonable potential analysis. Our comments will address the review process and several conditions in the permit, including but not limited to: 1, vested rights, compliance with the vested rights doctrine as mandated by Vermont common law. As you all know, Vermont has a very early vested rights policy. Second would be the agency's implementation of this doctrine as on permits issued under the authority granted the Secretary by 10 VSA 1263, the Vermont Water Pollution, i.e. the Vermont Water Pollution Control Act. There will be comments on ammonia in the nature of the derivation of the limitations, the applicability of the limits in the permit to ensure compliance with the water quality standards and allow proper operational flexibility at the plant, and the compliance schedule for the ammonia clearly stating that the ammonia limits have been waived until the new facility is online. There will be comments on chlorine, the application of the chlorine effluent limitation, and the ability of the analytical method cited in the permit to reliably produce accurate chlorine results. Regarding the phosphorus optimization plan, we're intending on commenting regarding the lack of review and approval by the agency before the town implements this plan. And regarding the phosphorus reduction and elimination plan, the practicality of this plan when it's common knowledge that the town is going to have to build a new wastewater treatment facility to comply with the TMDL and significantly upgrade or build a new facility to comply with the ammonia limitations. Other issues that will be discussed or commented on by the town is the operations and management emergency response plan, the settable solids collection, and the whole effluent toxicity testing sample collection and protocol. We will have those comments in by the end of the comment period in writing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and one other thing on your pie chart. There's a significant source of phosphorus in Lake Champlain missing from that, and that is the internal recycling of the natural phosphorus in the lake. In several of the areas in the lake, the recycling of phosphorus that has been deposited over decades is a significant source of phosphorus, and it should be mentioned on the chart.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Okay. Well, we thank you all very much for your comments and your time. And please do submit your comments via email or mail. And again, thank you. We really appreciate your time.
I feel like they covered it.
Okay, I think we're ready to start. And just a note, I mean, I think I forgot to let a couple select board members know that Randy and Wayne were going to be here for this presentation. So they've been helping the town really review the permit and will be helping to put together our official comments during the comment period, which is due
The 28th.
the 28th of July.
Yeah.
It would be great to get that list of what Randy read off that he's going to comment on.
Yeah, and I can,
So-
so it's in a draft form right now, but we'll be continually kind of revising that until
Okay.
A few days before it's due, so that I can send out that to all of you.
Just even if you just send what, all the item, just
Yep.
the list that he read.
What he has so
Yeah.
far. Yep, I can do that.
As a draft. And I think based on the input, the comments will probably change a little bit based on what we heard tonight. So
Right.
Yeah, no, it's been very helpful to have the technical
Yes.
expertise to,
Okay, I think we'll move on to item 5, the town plan revisions. So we've met.
do you want to do the engineer on-call?
Oh,
engineering
yes,
agreement first?
sorry, item
Let's skip
4.
that too.
Consider approving the on-call engineering agreement with East Engineering, that's
Tyler Billingsley.
Tyler
Yep.
Billingsley. So he's done some work for the town. We looked at that agreement the last time we met, and we decided we'll hold off on formal acceptance until, anybody who wanted to look at it and have input has the opportunity. So that was in our packet again. The expectation is sort of he's on call as needed to support the town efforts on civil engineering. And I guess we could have a motion.
So the,
Go
one
ahead.
before you do the motion, so this is when we had Mike Weisel, this is just about exactly the agreement we had with Mike. And Tyler has the same one with the town of Richmond. So it's cost effective to us, rather than having to do a new contract for each time we use them, that we do this, giving us a good rate. And we have someone that we can contact and call, and he's just down the road, he walks here, so it's been very helpful, a good relationship.
So I'll make a motion, Phil.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the on-call engineering agreement with East Engineering to be signed by town administrator.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a second to that?
Second it.
All right, second by Mary Lee. Any other discussion?
Question. I was looking for like a expiration date. Is this just ongoing, or is this for a period of time and then we renew?
I think it's ongoing. He said if at any point we're not happy, we could end
Since
it.
it's
We're
on
not-
call, it's not like
yeah,
we're obligated to pay
We're
them.
not bound
We could
to
just
it.
stop when we want to stop
And,
and start when we
he's
want to.
very open to communication with them if there's any issues. He's been very receptive to,
I would agree.
it's been very good
Yep, I would agree.
so far, so I think,
So,
I think it would be a benefit to the town.
but that's a good point. I think at any time, we're either unhappy or it's not working out, or he is unable to be as timely as we might need, we can, certainly do whatever we want. There's
And then the other piece to that is exclusivity. It's not an exclusive contract. I just want to make that a point, that we're also under no obligation to exclusively him, and we can concurrently or separately have others as well.
Yeah,
But
that's
it's
good.
beneficial to have that,
Absolutely.
someone who's gets familiar with the town projects, and
Absolutely.
So-
I agree.
yep.
But that's a good point. Any other comments or discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion to approve this agreement with East Engineering, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? There's none, so the motion passed. And next is item 5, and Alex will help lead us through this. I think we've met maybe 4 times, or around 4 times already, where we've taken a couple chapters out of the proposed Hinesburg Town Plan. Each time, I think about in each chapter, there were some comments made and suggestions. Alex took those and incorporated them in a second draft, I guess, draft number 6, and forwarded them to us. And the purpose today is to just sort of go over those, and it might be good to talk about the timing moving forward. Alex, can you walk us through that?
Yep. Which would you like to do first?
The timing, I think, is always good to know.
So the purpose of this whole process is to get you to a place where you're comfortable with the plan and you're ready to go to a public hearing. You're required to have 2. The Planning Commission has already had 1. I think the bulk of the public comment has already come in at the Planning Commission level, but statutorily you're required to have 2 as well. So we need to have a draft that you can support in order to go to a public hearing, because once you start that process, if you make any further changes, you have to have more public hearings. So it's sort of a waste of time and energy if we go in half-cocked. So if you are satisfied at the end of the discussion tonight, I can clean it up and get it ready for a hearing, and then it's just a matter of picking which of your upcoming meetings you want to hold those 2 required hearings on. You have 3 meetings in August. The first one is too soon. We wouldn't be able to warn it with the 15-day required warning period. The 2 other meetings in August are possible. The second one would be a little tight to get the warning in, but it could happen. Certainly we could do it for your 3rd meeting in August, which is the 31st. It looks like you have 1 meeting in September planned at this point.
Right.
The first one is the August 31st
Oh, that's right.
meeting.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Just sort of shifted that backwards. So I know when Mike was on the board, he was very interested in having these hearings after the summer, vacation season and kids were back in school. And I was pushing to, let's just get them done, and had hoped that we would be having hearings in June, but we didn't reach that goal. So, from my standpoint, I'm not sure it matters whether you try to start them in August or if you just wait until September and have me do some advertising and see if there's some additional feedback coming in. There is, however, a deadline. The statute says that if you don't act on the plan proposed by the Planning Commission within a year of their public hearing, then it's just considered denied or
Tabled.
Yeah, not acted upon, and then the Planning Commission would have to restart their process, hold their own hearing, and re-forward you the document, which isn't the end of the world, but it'd be nice not to have to do that. Their hearing was on November 9th. So that is, to the extent we have a drop dead date for this version of the plan in this go around, that's it. If you were to hold a couple hearings in end of August, beginning of September, and a member of the community actually did come who hadn't come prior and gave you a good suggestion, and you thought we should do a little more work on that, or we should make that change, you would have to hold more hearings on the newly revised draft.
Hearings.
That's my understanding, is that it resets. So it wouldn't be hard to envision, if that were to happen, you getting very close to the November 9th date.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, it's up to you whether you want to start in August or you want to start in September and push that envelope in terms of the November 9th deadline.
It sounds like maybe getting 1 done fairly quickly in case there is a surprise or any of us sort of go, ooh, yeah, we missed that, or that's a big concern. That seems like a reasonable idea, and not to have anyone throw any pens at me, but this doesn't have to be during a regularly scheduled
No, you can
time
have a
period.
hearing
We
at
could
any
have a meeting in September. It doesn't even have to be on a Monday night, but expect it would be maybe 2 hours at the most.
I think if you consider the school schedule, and if that's a barometer of public sort of participation, school's back in session in August, isn't it? Am I making that up?
No, that's true.
Sometimes it's September, I'm not sure what.
It's August.
Yeah, it's August.
Yeah. So I think if you
At least it's the August 30, August
I think
31st.
if you held a hearing on the 31st, most people would be back from whatever summer festivities.
Labor Day in general, because everything changes after Labor Day.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know when Labor Day is in relation to your August 31st meeting. Is it literally
That's
the
first
week
Monday
prior?
First Monday in September.
Right. So that would be the 4th. So the 31st is the Thursday prior to Labor Day. So I don't know if that would
Well, you've got the fair, you've
Squeeze
got
people.
finishing up. I think after Labor Day is
Right, everyone's back on
ideal.
on a better schedule.
Yeah, I think the first one.
The 31st.
You are required to have two, so it is possible that you could have the first one in August, advertise both, and invite people to come to whichever one is most convenient for them, and that you're willing to listen at both of them. You know.
And we have only one meeting in September, correct?
Yeah.
Yep, on the 18th.
So,
And as a point of reference for you, Phil, the school's first day is the 30th, Wednesday,
August 30th.
August 30th, yep.
so I mean,
Well, I'd be happy to schedule it for you that way and warn it that way, and make sure that the PR associated with it was, inviting to come to either. You know, you're welcome to.
Or written comments.
Right, of course.
I mean, they're all full, I think, but
As
does that
far as
seem?
the August.
Yeah, just,
Yeah.
what's planned to be on the agenda.
For August 31st, I mean, I don't know for sure. There's going to be, let's see. We're going to start the budget development process, which will be
Right.
around that time. But that's not, I mean, some of this we're going to be taking care of. Other things, there's going to be some other RFPs that are going to be out that we'll have to award bidding. But I have an electronic folder in there. I don't.
I wouldn't mind having another meeting in September.
Yeah, I am feeling just this, toward the end of September, maybe.
And so not doing this
No,
on the 31st?
I think do it on the 31st, and then, 3 weeks later or so, have another meeting specifically just for this, for the second meeting. And
Okay. And not doing it on your September 18th meeting?
Right, since we only meet once.
Which also gives us the opportunity to do anything else we might need to sneak in
Right.
on that meeting.
So I would propose, maybe at the 18th and then maybe the 25th. We do it on the 25th. So we'd have a regular meeting on the 18th, and we would have this special meeting, which, probably won't take us too late into the evening, just for that purpose, and if there were any other items. That way, we're not jamming everything into the 18th either. Is that just an idea?
How far ahead do we have to schedule the second one?
They both require 15 days warning, so it'd be great to warn them together, but we could also hold one, see what the comments are, and then warn the second one after that, if you want. It can work either which way.
That would give us time to do that. Even we could even almost wait till we could say tentatively, so we've got it blocked out on the 25th, and
Is there a reason why we can't commit to it right now?
no, I'm okay with committing to it now.
Are you? Are you?
Committed to the 18th?
Yes.
And the 25th?
The 31st and the 25th?
Yeah.
Yeah. August 31st, September 25th.
Is
Mayor-
that a Thursday?
No, those are
No, they're
Mondays.
both Mondays.
Okay.
Or, sorry, the 31st is a
Thursday.
Thursday.
Okay,
September moves to the Mondays.
yeah,
Yeah, okay.
sorry.
So the only wrinkle is I may be at a planning conference in DC on the 25th, but I don't have to be.
I'm hesitant to do one in August because I want people to participate, and I don't think you're going to get much participation at that date in August.
Yeah.
I really don't. It's Fair Week, kids are back to school that day, that week. I just think it's
So do we?
just defeating the purpose.
Why aren't people here now? I mean, you've been warning this.
It's summer, Andrea.
Okay.
Well, how about 2 in September?
Yeah, then how about we move to the next Thursday, which would be September 7th?
September 7th and the
For
25th?
Yeah, as a suggestion.
So the 7th isn't good for me.
I hate to add 2. I wouldn't mind, we could add 1. So we're too busy on the 18th of September is our first, that's our only meeting in September?
Right.
Well, I mean, basically,
Yeah,
you've
correct,
got the
yeah.
31st.
Yeah, because the 31st is our first meeting in September, even though it's
I
in
mean, we
August.
could do it on the 31st. I just think participation is going to be very limited.
Well, if we get it out there warned, and then if we, if we're able to warn both meetings at the same time, and ask for, people can submit written comments too if they can't make it, that might be a reasonable compromise.
What if we had it on September 11th and September 25th? Is that too close together?
Yeah.
That would be 3 in a row, right?
And you need a
That would be
separate
3
time.
meetings in a row.
For us?
Yeah.
You guys have done it before.
Right, but did you say, Alex, that there needs to be X amount of days between the hearings? No,
No.
it doesn't.
No, just the warning for the hearings has to be a certain number of days ahead of time, but
So
you
you
can
could have the hearings
you can
one
have
night
the
after the
hearings
other.
one after the other, yeah.
I guess I'm fine with the 31st, 25th.
Okay.
Schedule.
We hear what you're saying though. So we'll say it's the 31st of August and then the
25th September?
25th of September
Because the 18th is full and
is
you don't want
is
to
a
put any-
meeting, right,
Sure.
already. Yeah.
Because you already have that meeting scheduled and you could, but okay. All right.
So maybe you've sort of walked us through previously by chapter, I guess, and we have all the comments that we've put in. So, and maybe we do that. I'll leave it up to you, Alex. Taking a look at it, I mean, I think there were some edits, just simple edits and things and clarifications, Green
Yeah,
Mountain Transit
when I
versus
finally sat down
CCTV.
to make the changes, I was thinking, oh, this is going to take a long time, and it didn't actually.
No.
The changes you had asked for were relatively minor, although some of them engendered a fair amount of discussion. In
Right.
the end, the change that I think you wanted was not huge. So I'm happy. It's a track changes document, so the redlining is what your eyeballs should be drawn to. I'm happy to walk through the document and point out each one, or if you had time to review it ahead of time and you just want to say, everything looks good to me, except I'm curious about why you worded it this way on page blah. I can take you can lead as well. I'm not sure
Yeah.
which.
I mean, we just go by chapter. I mean,
Okay.
So we had the top priority.
If you want to start at page 7, that's the top priority actions page, which is where the document starts ahead of the first chapter. There are 2 additional top priority actions. One was to construct the Bissonnette Rec area, and so that was added, and with a short time horizon. And then the other was discussion that you had on a couple of different priorities about trying to get wildlife habitat factored in. And so I added a top priority action that actually refers to 4 separate actions in chapters 3 and 5. We didn't quite have that nailed. So, think about that. If that's what you had intended, that's what I took from it. And then the last one was the addition of these additional wells in one of the existing priority actions. The one that's missing here is Phil had suggested some modifications to an action item in the energy chapter. And I think there was consensus that maybe that action item could be elevated to a top priority action on this page. I didn't do that because I didn't know what if it would have revised language. But when we get to chapter 8, we might want to just say, hey, that one might be the one. It would be tidy to have most of the chapters have at least one sort of top priority action item that we're going to really call out. So barring any corrections, I'll just keep going. There's very little in the way of changes in Chapter 1. In fact, I don't think there are any.
No.
There was a duplicative paragraph on in Chapter 2, the first paragraph on page 16 of this draft 6, so that was deleted. There was a clarification about the Regional Planning Commission's sort of new population forecasts that are not part of the regional plan yet because it hasn't been adopted, but we know what they are. And so the chart that you see on page 17 was updated to show those revised numbers, and then there was an additional sentence added in the text to reflect that. At the bottom of page 17, I think, Andrea, you had asked that some language be added about this sort of oddity of not having a lot of population growth, but still seeing a fair amount of housing growth, and the fact that our changing demographics and household sizes. So I'm not sure if I captured it exactly the way you wanted, but that's what I attempted there.
Looks good.
That was it for Chapter 2, I believe. Well, actually, on page 23 of Chapter 2, this is a very minor change, but another year, I added another year to the chart on the bottom of page 23, since we have data for 2016 for new dwelling units. That was it for Chapter 2 changes. Chapter 3 on land use, there was a change on page 29 to action item 3.3.5 to recognize that preservation of green space both within the village area for active use as well as at the periphery of the village area for sort of more rural feel and separation. So there was some new language added there. On page 30, there were several changes. One, Andrea had asked me to just go through the document and change the word elderly to a term that is more accepted in describing that population, since elderly tends to connote a much, much older demographic, and seniors are a wider slice of that. Renewable energy systems isn't called that anymore. That was a very temporary name that they had. And some clarification about the fact that our village center designation lapsed, and that we intend to get it back as soon as this plan gets approved. There were some additional changes on page 32 regarding the wells that were actually built. So just tenses, instead of future tense, it's past tense. We've done it. You wanted a map added on the page 32, the overall zoning districts, so as not to confuse people on the following page with that just being a slice of Hinesburg, so I threw that in. Page 34 has just some references, some cross-references back to Chapter 5. We had some discussion about the tie-in between this land use section and the natural resources systems, ecosystem section. Also, you'll see that, as I noted on page 7, a couple of these became top priorities, and they were referenced on page 7, so that's been indicated. Again, minor change on page 36, a typo and just a reference to wastewater regulations, and the fact that most lots on the lake were developed prior to wastewater regulations. That was it for Chapter 3. In Chapter 4, one global change along with elderly to seniors was CCTA doesn't exist anymore, so I changed that to GMT for Green Mountain Transit. Let's see, anything else substantive in Chapter 4?
Does it make sense to, does everybody know GMT and ACTR, or does it make sense to spell it out and then acronym?
I think that's helpful.
It should be spelled out. If I didn't, that was an oops. Unless, the problem with acronyms is that once you designate them the first time. Generally,
Yeah.
you don't.
And did you
don't-
do it in
just-
chapter one?
You do it
and
once and then not again.
That's how I do it.
So
Maybe it's been done
I'd
already.
like to say it was done earlier, but I can make a note and check.
I don't know. I'm just kind of asking the question. I'm not saying you need to, but it comes to mind.
Yep. It's a stylistic thing, but it's
Yep.
certainly from an interpretability, it's important that we're not flinging acronyms around willy-nilly.
Government folks like to do that.
Yes, we do, don't we? On page 44, this was not a change that you talked about. It's really just a semantics change, but the Economic Development Committee reread Chapter 4, and this was one of their comments, that Hinesburg's wastewater capacity is limited in the same way its water capacity is limited. So I made that change
Make a note.
without you asking for it.
A note on page 42, people generations from now, when they read this document, will appreciate that photograph there of Hart and Mead.
Okay, good.
With the gas prices.
Oh, right, that's true. I had forgotten about that.
Isn't
You're
that what
right.
you always look for?
So Alex, getting back to the economic development's change, you're going to want to keep the word "and" in there, limited water and wastewater capacities.
Thanks, Tom.
No problem.
I would like to say that I would have caught that after I accepted the changes, but I might not have. Okay, so that's chapter 4. There are a few pictures left to be taken. I've been focusing on text. I'll go snap those pictures before this thing goes out for hearing, just so it's complete. In chapter 5, there were several changes, and so I think the first ones are on page 46 and 47, where the action items are. You had quite a lot of discussion about action items 5.1.1, and I thought there was another one. Oh, yes, for 5.2.1. You asked for planning commission feedback on those, and the planning commission felt that they were comfortable if these action items mimicked the language in the zoning regulations, which talks about primary and secondary resources and staying away from primary and minimizing impact on secondary. And so you can talk more about it, but that's what the language was changed to reflect. I think it still accomplishes the intent, which is to prioritize those resources and call them out as important, both in our local review and regulations and also at a state Act 250 level. But it's consistent with what we would require at under our local regulations. There was an issue about the name of our Land Preservation Fund. I had it wrong, so fix that. It's not acquisition, it's Preservation Fund. And there was a desire in action item, which is a top priority action item, 5.3.3, to flesh that out some and mention some of the other options that are out there, both for funding and for how to do land conservation. So you can read it. I made some changes there. Hopefully they work for you. On action item 535 on page 47, there was just some concern about people getting confused about the term master planning, since it's a regulatory requirement in our zoning for certain properties in the village, and to try to use a different phrase. So 535 was just reworded to not use the word master planning. Actually, I think that was the bulk of what you had for changes in Chapter 5. Like I said, you spent a lot of time on those couple of action items at the front end. And aside from some, land acquisition versus land preservation fund changes, Andrea had asked for a change to goal 5.10 on page 60. From ecological resources to systems, so that change was made. And I think that was it. That was it for Chapter 5, the natural resources chapter. So moving on to Chapter 6. This is our general government, community facilities and services section, and you actually did have quite a lot of discussion in this section, because of course it's what you do on a day-to-day basis or week-to-week basis. So a couple of new action items were added under goal 6.1, one of which you discussed, the 6.1.7. And another one, you had asked me to check with Mike Anthony about the source for the previous plan saying that the gravel pit had a life through 2030. And Mike clarified that he didn't believe that and didn't think it was based on anything that we ought to be trusting. It was probably just something that had been repeated over the years based on a study of some sort, but not one that he could document. So I added an action item to do that.
Okay, so he didn't have a date. He was willing to
No, he didn't.
say.
He didn't
Okay.
know. So I told him. I said, I think the board wants to know, and I think that's going to be an action item. We're probably going to want
Sounds
to hire a consultant, do some borings, and
Good
figure that
idea.
out. It can't be that difficult, but I'm no expert on that.
Yeah.
So new action item for that. And Mike Bissonette had made some comments about in this section about trying to be more, trying to be clear and more proactive about public health and community health issues. I think he had a broader sense of it in terms of affordability, but also traditional public health issues. So what I tried to do was change goal 6.2 to be not just about hazard mitigation, but to be about that, so about hazard mitigation as well as general health and welfare. So the goal changed in response to Mike's suggestion, and then a new action item was added. I think this is consistent with what we had talked about, that it would be difficult to sort of do a whole public health chapter right now since this plan is mature and we're ready to go to public hearing and adoption. But this action item says, let's do that.
Yeah.
627, right. Let's do that in the next town plan, similar to what Tom actually recommended many years ago when we were adopting a plan and said, we don't really have an economic development chapter. We should do that in the next plan, and we did. So that's what was added on the front end of Chapter 6. You wanted some additional information about town-owned buildings, so that's reflected on page 68.
Can I ask,
Go ahead.
on 6.2, children and families, how about if we stick in elders or seniors or something in there?
Okay.
Or-
We have a separate section in this chapter that deals specifically with that population.
Okay.
It's on page 84, 6.8, services for elders and the disabled.
Okay.
And there's a narrative in there and all that. So I think that's covered.
Okay.
So again, on page 68 and 69, some changes were made to at least discuss some of our town properties and buildings. And to update the language about the highway garage and our anticipated construction for that. I did say construction is anticipated in 2018. When talking to Steve Smith this morning, I forget. That's right, today's Thursday. This morning, he said that there's still some hope that maybe it could start in this year.
Yep.
So if you want me to change this to say 2017 or 2018, that would probably make sense. I understand there's a difficult quasi-municipal entity that's making it tough to figure that out. Let's see. There was a minor addition on page 69. The word recreational was added with regard to our roads and when we'd make decisions about paving them. Andrea asked for some information about our town cemeteries to be added, and that was placed on page 71. There's just a little bit of minor text there, and then there's a table that gives the name of each one and where it's located. I did check with Jean Miner in my text there in all caps. It says checking with her about which ones are town-owned or which are private.
Okay.
It was her understanding they're all town-owned, that we don't have any privately owned cemeteries in Hinesburg, which I thought was interesting. Westford, where I used to live, had 2 private cemeteries that were slowly on their way to becoming town cemeteries. It just hadn't happened yet, but
I thought the McCullough one was private, but
the McDonough one on
McDonough one, but-
north of Tyler Bridge Road. Well, Jean's in the office an awful lot. I can ping her again on that next time I see her. But I did ask her that question, and she said that they're all town-owned.
If they were privately owned, they'd be on the tax rolls?
I don't
Well,
know.
it's on somebody's land.
I think they've paid enough taxes. Sorry.
So the one section here that we're coming up to on page 74 that I could really use your help on after tonight's discussion is this text about the wastewater system and the options for upgrading it. So there's a box on page 74 that tries to simplify what the options are and talk about what some of the potential costs could be. And then there's some language, a little bit of language in above that. I'm still unclear as to where we are. I changed this from the original draft because I was under the impression that ammonia was not going to be a required requirement, but now it sounds like it is.
Well, that's what everyone thought.
Okay.
And maybe, I won't say misled, but that's what people thought. And so we were surprised to see that.
So the original box in your last draft had option 1 saying a cost of about $3 million for a nitrogen or ammonia upgrade.
I don't think we should include any of this.
Okay.
That's my opinion. I mean, it just seems it's too
You think it's
speculative.
It is
I mean,
speculative.
We just don't
yeah,
know. So I
right
could
now.
say we are in the mid, because of the new TMDL, Hinesburg is, grappling with needing to meet new state standards. And, at the time of this plan, we're in discussion with the state.
So I can make those changes. What I could use some help on is the text on page 74 says that a planning study was completed by Aldridge and Elliott in 2016, providing an analysis of options, blah, blah, blah. I still don't have a final draft of that study. I assume you've received it?
Yes.
Okay, so I just need
It's
to...
just a draft, though. I mean, it's not a
It
final.
is still a draft. Yeah,
Oh,
okay.
so it hasn't been finalized.
I thought it was, no?
Really?
I can email, actually I'll check and see what we have, if it's a final
Okay.
draft. I thought it
So
was, but-
one is just an internal thing. I'd like to have a copy of the
Yes.
final report on that so I can think and be a planner. The other part is I just want to get the language right in the plan. And so I can refer to their report as a still being drafted or anticipated completion in 2017 or something. I'm just not sure.
I think it's complete, and we'll need to clarify that.
Okay.
And we might put in here that there's a new permit being proposed, and with an expectation of a potential multi-million-dollar upgrade.
Well, and actually, Wayne told me before he left here this evening, the DEC asked him just to go ahead and send that to
Can you
them.
speak up?
Wayne, before he left tonight, he said that DEC had asked him to send that plan to them, so.
Thank you.
I agree with Andrea that this is probably in the box is maybe too much detail because it is speculative. It's such a moving target.
Well, that's part of why I wanted to have the final version of the plan, because regardless of what the DEC would permit and expect, the Aldrich and Elliott report says something.
Right.
And I was trying to say, most people are not going to read that report, but if we could summarize it quickly, they could understand the magnitude of the issue that we're facing.
Right.
But I'm happy to just delete all that and just put some clarifying text in, as you suggested.
And I think if you look in there and there's a basic summary, that you want to put in, I think that it's important that people understand the magnitude.
Yeah, millions of dollars.
Of what it will take to upgrade that, we've done all the upgrades we can, and now it's a big, significant change.
Okay. Is everybody else good with deleting that box and just improving the text a bit?
Yes.
Okay. I can do that. Thank you. That's very helpful. So moving right along, so page 73 will have to change a little bit with regard to the text that was added about the wastewater system and the ammonia issue, since it appears to be somewhat changeable. But onward from there, let's see, what else did we have? Just the little top priority moniker was added on page 75 to the BISNet, construct the BISNet rec area. So there was some discussion about the original action item 6.4.5, which talked about making road width, shoulder, striping improvements to paved roads to connect the village and rural parts of town. So that was completely rewritten. I think you had asked me to look at what the Complete Streets legislation requires, and it requires the consideration of appropriate accommodations for pedestrians and bicyclists. So I took the same wording and just plopped it in here in terms of consider, and then tried to still reiterate that we need to pay particular attention to certain roads that connect the village to other parts of town or to commuting routes. Let's see. Yeah, so just some basic updates on the rec area.
6.4.6, because I think that's really important.
Yeah, so it's a bit duplicative with the way it was sort of absorbed into 6.4.5, the second sentence in particular. So 646 says paved roads are resurfaced, include accommodations for pedestrians and cyclists. 645 essentially says the same thing in the first sentence, and then calls out specific roads in the second sentence.
It's not as specific.
Well, I'm happy to change it to whatever you would rather see. The second portion of 646, where it talks about working with landowners to explore mechanisms for making private unpaved roads available for public non-motorized recreation,
Is 647.
Yeah, that became 647.
yeah, I think I believe you're right. That was deemed duplicative as well. But Marilee, if you would like to see the wording of the new 645 incorporate some additional pieces from the deleted 646, just tell me which pieces and I'll do it.
It's more specific, more detailed than 6.4.6, and that makes it more powerful. Whenever paved roads are resurfaced instead of when making improvements to paved roads.
Right. Well, again,
And
the discussion last
maybe it's
time
minor.
focused on what are we actually going to do and what are we required to do. And we are, well, not to be blunt, we haven't been very good about including bike lanes and all of that whenever roads are repaved, at least in my experience. And the Complete Streets legislation doesn't require us to do it. It requires us to consider doing it. And if we find that it's too costly or there's a physical constraint that makes it impossible, we're not compelled to do it. So we can be very definitive, but I think my impression is that you didn't want to be definitive if we weren't required to be. And my comment is that we haven't been. So unless there's going to be a sea change and we're going to spend a lot more money on paving our roads, I wouldn't want us to say we're going to do something we're not.
I would like to see us be definitive about it. I'm upset by the people who have been killed on bikes, and that's not going to stop people from riding. And I think we should do, how much is a human life worth? I think we should do everything we can to support bike safety.
Well, we have
narrowed the lanes with our painting.
Yes,
I mean, that's something you can do for a reasonable price.
yeah.
And I've actually heard complaints from quite a few motorists that the lanes are too narrow. So I'm pretty happy with what we're doing. I think it's certainly not nothing.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
it's,
I-
and, you know, it's something affordable. If you start talking about bike lanes on some of our roads with shoulders that drop off 10 feet, you're talking
Right, widening the shoulders is a
millions of
huge
dollars.
expense, right.
And you're not, you know, as much as you want to protect every bicyclist, it's not going to happen. So I think what we're doing is reasonable. There's plenty of dirt roads that people can use. So I don't want to be boxed in and say we're going to create bike lanes on every road. That's just not feasible.
Right, so leaving it the way it is in 6.4.5 gives us the option of just doing the white lines.
Or it says we should consider, we should consider them. I think what 646 says, unless it's rewritten, says whenever we pave roads, we will include appropriate accommodations. So it says every time we pave a road, we're going to do something. And you know, I don't, while I'd like to do those things, I don't want to put something in here that we just know we're not going to do. So.
But at the same time, when we're doing the budget and, you know, we're talking about paving, I think we could do a better job of, and it's actually in anticipation of doing the budget, it's something that should be considered, so we're not debating it
At that point.
at that
Oh, I
point.
agree.
Yeah.
I could not agree more.
Yeah.
I feel like every time you get to the budget and you talk about paving, somebody in the room is saying, have you thought about whether the shoulder could be
Right.
widened a little bit? And it's always too late. Like,
Yeah.
you know, there needs to be some assessment.
Well, I
I'm
think
a planner,
that's-
so I want to
yeah,
plan it.
no,
but
I
there's got to be
think
some
that-
assessment so Mike can walk in and say,
Yeah.
the paving budget for next year for Shelburne Falls Road, this many miles is going to be this much if we just do the current surface, and it's going to be this much if we widen, you know, there's enough shoulder we can widen it by a foot or 2 feet, and that's going to add $1 million or 200,000, you know, just so you
So
can
it has
see
to be
the
a
numbers.
directive coming from us of how we
It
want
does.
the budget
And-
to be
and
considered.
I think really to make this happen, back to the planning, is in the same way we had a plan for Shelburne Falls Road a while back on how to make it a little safer, and it was a piece here, it was a piece there. You know, it wasn't, you know, $1 million. It was a little bit here, a little bit there. And I think the same could be done for the town, where an assessment is done that says, where are the dangerous intersections? Where's the, you know, where is a place that a slightly wider shoulder would make a difference because it's getting a lot of use and it's a bad spot. So, you know, if we were able to sort of peck away at some of those pieces, and if we had that list, then Michael could look at those and say, I'm paving, you know, Hollow Road, and we're going to, you know, this is the one thing or two things that are shown on that. And, you know, we make a decision whether we incorporate that or not. But, you know, if we just look at the road, at any particular road, at any one year, we don't know what to do. And the only thing there is let's widen it. And that's cost prohibitive. So I think there might be some pieces in there to do. But we'd have to have a list of what are our options over the next 10 years and you know, when would we do them? And in many cases, it's you do them when you do repaving.
Right. Yeah, it's just a sidebar. Doing some bicycle commuting this season from where I live in South Burlington now. I would love to know how the city of South Burlington and the town of Shelburne have a road like Spear Street that is very wide enough to have a substantial bike lane through most of the road, when it's just a rural paved road like Shelburne Falls, Charlotte. I'm curious how that ever came to be.
That's what they do for the summer. They are not grading gravel roads. Their summer work is widening roads.
You don't think it was maybe like a large federal
thought it was a
grant or
grant.
something
Nope.
that
is.
because that road is so much wider than Dorset Street, which runs parallel to
Yep.
it.
No,
or,
they've been working on it for the last 3 years. And I don't think it was a grant. I think it's
I
just...
assumed it was some
don't
kind
think
of grant that made it a bike.
It's a designated
path. Right.
bikeway in that regard.
know.
Anyways, maybe
Maybe
someday
it is, but we can find
do
out.
that with
Yeah.
Shelburne Falls
Yes.
Road. But-
So I think what's on the table here is, perhaps the wording. I think we're in agreement that 645 and 646 sort of say the same thing, but one says is maybe a little stronger than the other.
Right. So what's the disposition of the board?
I think 645 is what we asked you to do the last time, so I'm fine with it.
But I think the discussion that we just have is something that is, that we can try to implement internally.
Okay.
So is that okay, Marilyn?
I understand the cost, but like I said, what's the cost of a human life? It doesn't make me really comfortable. I wish we could make it stronger, but I'm not seeing how to make it stronger.
All right. Well, I'll move on then. Page 77.
Well, maybe what we should do instead of what we should do in 6.4.6 is say something about evaluate paving projects each year, or develop priority projects at dangerous.
Yeah, evaluate existing street safety in regard to pedestrians and bicycle or non-vehicles, and evaluate and develop a plan
Yeah.
for opportunities.
Evaluate would mean that we would get some kind of prioritization. So evaluate.
So you want to just add a sentence that says evaluate and prioritize road segments that are in greatest need of improvements for safety, for bicycle and pedestrian use?
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Do you need to identify those first before they're
Did you
evaluated?
say
Do you need to
evaluate and
identify them
improve?
before they're evaluated? Do we know what those roads are?
No, we would need to
That's what we need to
that
do,
would
To
be it.
identify
Yeah.
first, I would think. would be-
Identify, evaluate, and prioritize.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, got it. So on page 77, there was just a couple minor changes. Trails Committee is not responsible for trails in Juprags Park. Let's see. You'll notice, you may not have, but every once in a while you'll see a little bit of a formatting issue where a table or a picture drops off the page. Pay no attention to that. Once the track changes are all accepted, it'll all get cleaned up. Pay attention to the red line stuff. Page 80, just some basic tense changes based on the new school district. Similar on page 81. Nothing else substantive until we get to page 84, where the one change I already mentioned about getting rid of the word elderly, using elders or seniors. But you had also wanted to, I think it was you that said this and not Mike Bissonette, but someone had said add Hinesburg's religious institutions into action 6.8.2. Since they're one of the partner groups that we work with on the provision of services for our elders. Again, some non-substantive changes until you get to Chapter 7, Transportation. And as with the exception of some minor changes, there's a cross-reference on page 88 under Action 723 to the Community Facility section, and there's a couple of minor changes for CCTA to GMT. I think the substantive change was on page 90 to Action Item 7.6.5. So page 90, that action item says minimize speeding through enforcement, and you had wanted to add road design as well as enforcement. I'm looking for any other substantive changes. I don't see any in Chapter 7. Chapter 8, and in this chapter I know both Tom has some comments that I think he was going to bring up tonight, and Phil, you were working on potentially some change language for an action item. There was a change on page 95, just energy creation and generation, pretty minor. And then there were several, again, fairly minor changes to various action items that you can see listed. But this would be a good moment to address your two comments.
Yeah, I think you reminded me that, that I probably brought up, or we were looking at 841.
Yes.
Maximize the energy efficiency of town-owned buildings and vehicles. And quite honestly, I wasn't quite sure, and I hadn't written down or couldn't find what I had written down on what we were going to do, so I kind of took a stab at it. I sent it to you, and you were like, well, that's sort of covered elsewhere in a way, and so I'm not quite sure what we would change in there. My suggestion was that looking at some of the state goals of 90% renewables by 2050, and that, we not only maximize energy efficiency, but we move toward that goal. But, after I sort of looked at it, I see a lot in here, and it all makes sense, and I'm not sure adding more necessarily will allow us to move any faster or help guide us any better.
Is this goal still something you feel might be worthy of elevating to a top priority, put it on page 7 goal within the energy chapter, this maximizing energy efficiency in municipally owned buildings and vehicles?
Well, there's a few things in here. It's the town itself, the town buildings and vehicles, the town
It's the one
energy
thing we have
goal.
actual control
Yes,
over.
that's
Yes,
true.
it's
Then
difficult
there's the piece about, helping homeowners and doing all that. So it seems like we might want to do that. And, I think, it would be appropriate for us to take a look town-wide and really begin to plan, how we reduce our energy budget. So for example, I'll just throw this out there. Maybe we need a really efficient car for the town. And if Mike Anthony needs to go to Williston to pick up a part instead of driving his big truck, or the police is going, they take the efficient vehicle over. So,
Many
that's just an
municipalities do
idea.
that, yes.
Yeah, many do, most do. And so, it feels like town-wide, rather than just individual budgets, we should be looking at the big picture. And I think, we've already mentioned that it would be good to have better, I'll say, oversight of all of the structures from a single point, rather than each department takes care of their own building. So that's sort of in that 841, in a way. That's just very,
Right, you're giving
basic.
specific examples
Yeah.
of how to tackle that action
Right.
item, then there may be others.
So is that going to be elevated to a top priority? Seems reasonable that it should be.
Well, I think it sounds reasonable over the next 5 years. If we were to take all the town functions and make them as efficient as possible,
I think
save
Rocky,
money.
I think Rocky Martin did, paid a quite a lot of attention to that while he was here,
Yeah.
as our director of buildings and facilities. But I think most of the efficiency improvements that were done under his watch were probably 10 plus years ago.
Right.
With regard to the heating system for this building and pumps at, the sewer lagoons and that sort of thing. So there's probably more that could be done.
Sure.
It might not be low-hanging fruit, but
There is. I mean, you see, a window air conditioner, and instead of putting in a heat pump, it's going to be 3 times as efficient, So
there you
there
go.
are opportunities there.
I can tell you that the air conditioner on the 3rd floor runs every single minute of the
and
day
appropriate.
through most of the summer.
Yeah, and you want to have it. And so, and it's a very inexpensive way to do it in the short run for capital costs, but then running it is very expensive. So I would be, open to the idea of elevating one of these, but I'll hear what everybody else has to say.
I think it's a good idea. I also think we're talking about energy efficiency, but it seems like we also I don't see anything. Well, I guess support development of alternative renewable sources, but that the town could be doing more things like the trackers on municipal property. Is there anything in there that says that we should be doing that?
I don't think so, no. I think that it's goal number 8.2, which talks about supporting the development of alternative renewable energy sources. And action item 8.2.1 talks about encouraging the use of renewable energy systems for on-site electricity generation. That's a broad statement that applies townwide. We should encourage everyone to do that. It sounds like you would like to call out us ourselves and say, particularly the municipality.
Yeah.
I'm happy to add that to 8.2.1. That's probably the logical place to add it, as opposed to 8.4.1.
Yeah.
All right.
Aaron, have you got any thoughts or?
My thoughts around this is when we're talking about adding top priorities, when we're not even adding, when we're talking about top priorities, are we matching them and aligning them with what our fundamental core values and principles are that we've established that we're trying to achieve with this document? And then anytime we have this question of adding a priority to a list that we already have, how does it match up, knowing that there's limited amount of resources, there's limited amount of time, and there's limited amount of energy to do just one of them, let alone adding more and more. So I think this has been mentioned before. Everything we talk about in this document is worthy of putting into the document for its own reasons. But that classification of top priority, we're specifically calling it out as, by the next time we get this plan revised, it should be done, or else it's not a top priority. So I am cautious about saying, yeah, let's add something as a top priority, whatever it is, whether it's this topic or another topic, or even the ones that we already have there. And when I look at this document, that's kind of where my eyes go to first, and probably a lot of people, honestly. And what's a word less than worry or concerned? There is hesitation in saying that, I don't know how many there are, I'd have to count them again, but dozen and a half, dozen?
No, it's not that many.
Dozen, I don't know.
The top priority action items.
Yeah, how many are there?
Some of them are grouped into, singular sort of priorities, but I think if you added this one, I think we're up to maybe 10.
Can
9
we get,
or 10.
And will we have 8 years now?
Yes.
Yeah. Can we get 10 done in 8 years? And that's the question I ask myself. Not specifically what they are, but how many there are.
But what they are really matters, because some
Absolutely.
of them, we actually have control over.
Absolutely.
And
And-
it's something that we can work into the budget. And so
that
that's-
again gets at our priorities and values about what we do, because that's what the budget really is we're spending money on the things that matter most to us.
But, it's important that these are investments that will save money in the long run. And
True.
we know that.
Which is a value for us.
right.
Is to save money. We're not
So-
here to spend it.
Right, make
So-
efficient use of the taxpayers.
Bingo. So
Contributions.
anytime we talk about top priorities, and that's the thing that I've been thinking about as I look over this document, is top priorities. In addition to all the words that are associated with it, but just keep going back to that and making sure that it's a practical document on some level.
Well, I think the document itself lays out to some degree what the values are for the community, and then there's some specificity about how to flesh that out and how to do them. My own criteria for putting things on the top priority list are less about does it really meet with our values, because I think most of these all do.
Yes.
It's rather, are you going to commit to doing something about it? Is there a entity in this community that will work on those and actually make progress? Because just to put them there because we think they're nice, but we don't think we can do much, I think is disingenuous. So we do have an energy committee.
That's
They
right. We
are
have
committed to
a
this.
new energy committee with some good resources on there that really have just come together in the last year.
So agreed, but think about the one just before we just talked about the roads. So what was the wording? Evaluate, prioritize, identify, evaluate, and prioritize.
Yep.
So that's all good, and I support that. How do we make that happen? I'm not asking for an answer.
Well, thankfully, that's not a top priority one, so we don't have to worry about it right now. I'm just kidding. Well,
I know you are. I know you are.
You have a highway department, department head and a town administrator and a board that spends an awful lot of time thinking about roads and budgets. I think you guys could make it happen. To be honest with you, on this one, I think the Energy Committee is a great resource, and they would probably shepherd most of the action items in the energy section. I'm a little concerned, though, that we no longer have a buildings and facilities director. And so having that comprehensive idea of what the energy usage of this building is and all those window AC units, for example, nobody's thinking about that. And Rocky did when he was here.
You're just trying to get through a hot day in the third floor. You know what I mean? Literally, it's.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to what we have for staffing, though, because even Rocky, that was early on, if even able to, because he wasn't, buildings and facilities wasn't his focus for a long time. His energy was in other places.
But I think it's a recognition that organizationally, we need to be thinking about that because we're thinking about the buildings. So,
Absolutely.
I mean, the priority item is really for us to think about our needs for staff.
Right.
And where we're, so that's the top
That's the bigger
priority,
picture.
really.
I mean, that gets at a bigger conversation, I think, about the role of the select board in managing those bigger items and bigger thinking policy and focusing our energies in those ways, or at least putting a little more attention to it, and how can we achieve that? There's perhaps ways to do that.
The more we talk about this, the more I think it should be a top priority. We should have, I think it's obvious, we should have a town car that's electric that staff can use instead of driving cars that get 12 miles a gallon or something like that.
If it makes you feel any better, our zoning administrator, who does log a fair amount of miles and gets reimbursed for those, drives an electric vehicle. But
that does make me feel a lot better. And we should have these heat pumps. The state is really pushing those for.
Yeah, there's all sorts of incentives for those.
So this is attention and some amount of money in the short term, but in the long term, it's going to save us a lot of money.
Yeah, that is the benefit of being a municipality. We're not going away. So if the savings accrue over time, they can really be big. Because unlike a homeowner, we're never going to sell this town and move somewhere else.
I don't know, we might have to be able to have a sewage treatment.
It all depends, yeah. That's what I was thinking.
Okay, so I think I get it. You want it elevated as top priority. The way it's worded now captures it at least well enough. Andrea wanted an addition to 8.2.1. I captured that. Can we move? Can we keep going? Okay.
So Alex, one of my questions
Oh,
was,
right, Tom,
was
you
about,
had comments on these.
Page 100 about Hydro-Quebec, for example, being counted toward renewable. That's page 100, like the last paragraph. Talks about renewable energy credits, 55% of Vermont's energy output being renewable by 2017, 75% by 2032. I'm just curious if that counts.
It does.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
That was
absolutely.
a big debate, but it does count, yep.
Yeah, the change I made, Tom, with regard to that suggestion was on page 98. I wasn't looking at the page you just referenced, but the answer that you just got is correct as far as I know. But on page 98, you had pointed out that first opening sentence wasn't accurate. And so I made some changes in there to reflect the fact that, yeah, a chunk of our electricity is from non-renewable energy, but a big chunk of it is from Hydro-Quebec, which is, in fact, renewable.
Okay, I saw that.
Did you want to bring up any of your other changes,
Yeah,
Tom? Because
I'm
there were a
bouncing
couple
back and forth. I didn't bring my notes, so
Well, I brought your message if you want to.
I've got it on here, actually. Let me see. Let me see. The one that really I don't care for is Hinesburg should support statewide efforts to place a carbon tax on fossil fuels.
Yeah, where is that one again?
That is the fifth bullet point on the right column on page 103.
Right. So again, this was crafted by an energy committee who's very focused on those sorts of things, and the planning commission reviewed it. But you are the policymakers, so I will make whatever changes you see fit based on Tom's concern.
I will have to arm wrestle this one, Tom. So I think that, I support those myself, and I think it's, and you get the CEO of Exxon who supports a carbon tax as an effort, as a way to wean off of fossil fuels. But
Can you speak up, please?
Sorry.
Thank you.
So I said I supported, I would support this along with the Energy Committee and the Planning Commission. That, it certainly is controversial. There's no doubt about it. But you get the CEO of Exxon who supports a carbon tax. So it's not just one side of there's several arguments to it. But, I'd listen to what the Selectboard has to say too.
I would support keeping it in there.
Well, I simply cannot support any more taxes on our residents. The CEO of Exxon is a multi-billionaire. I mean, we're making progress on getting things more efficient. I mean, that much is clear. I don't see how taxing people to the brink of bankruptcy, which is what's happening to some people. It really is. I mean, to run my business, I need fossil fuel.
Right.
You start adding 20 cents a gallon to my cost of doing business, and I'm not going to have a business. I'm going to fold it up. And that's what it comes down to for guys like me or people who are trying to afford to drive to work.
Right.
There's other ways to go about it. I just can't. I can't support it.
The state, some of the state proposals, some of them, they take all that money and they turn it back to the people. It's not used to fund anything else other than to help convert people away from fossil fuels. So I hear what you're saying, an added tax. Of course, the price of gasoline now is much less than it was just 2 or 3 years ago. So if there is a carbon tax, now would be the time to do it. But We should hear what everybody else has to say.
I believe that in Canada, I know they put a tax on gasoline, and I know that they do in Europe. So the gas is considerably higher in Canada. Anybody who drives up to Montreal knows fill up before you cross the border. And anybody who lives near the border in Canada crosses the border to fill up here. Same thing would happen if Vermont was the state in New England that had a tax that elevated gasoline. Everybody'd go to New Hampshire or New York to get their gas. I think this needs to be a federal law, not a state law. And I don't really know what Hinesburg would do as a town to support it. It's a statement of what it's like saying, I know some Vermont towns voted to impeach George Bush at their town meeting. It's a statement of belief. It's not really anything that has any effect. So I don't know what I feel about a carbon tax, but I don't know if this is the place to have that statement.
I think you're saying, how would the town support it? What would the town actually do?
Right, and
It's a good question.
I'm thinking nothing, that this is a statement of belief. And I'm not sure that the town plan is the place to have it.
It's more important that we take actions than putting in, I think what you're saying is that let's put language in here of things that we actually can do something about. So I think that's a reasonable argument.
As I read it, that's what I see too. I mean, you know, I'm incredibly sympathetic with Tom's position because I'm there too. I can't, as most people can't, or nor do they want to afford, whether you can afford it or not, pay more tax. But what does that really mean? Is it just a statement of value, or are we actually going to, is there a verb in there, the word support, that we're actually going to do something about? And I'd be fine with it being gone, honestly. Not that I'm not...
Just deleting the bullet entirely?
Yeah. You know, not that I'm necessarily for or against it, but I'm not looking to add more taxes to what I pay or anybody else. But more to the point, what's the action there? Like, how are we going to support it? If we were going to keep that there, I would say we'd want to put something there that says Hinesburg will support statewide efforts to place a carbon tax on fossil fuels by X, Y, and Z. And it's not what it says. It just is sort of a more blanket statement about we support rain after a sunny day and, you know, nighttime to be dark and daytime to be light, you know. Who doesn't?
So I hear,
Just delete it.
Sounds like that's what we'll do.
Thank you, Mr. Ayer, for that
And
suggestion.
there was one more, and not that I disagree with the bullet point at all, but I just think in terms of being consistent, energy efficient lighting and appliances should be encouraged in all new homes instead of required. That's the second bullet on that same
column, couple
column.
bullets up from the one we were just
Right.
talking about.
And I think where that's going, maybe in contrast to the carbon tax thing, is that it's harder and harder to find inefficient lighting and appliances because the marketplace is moving to that. So that's what's available.
Well, secondarily, you're not going to, we don't have the staff to go around and check homes to see who is put in.
Oh, by the way, Tom.
Okay, well, I can easily change from required to encouraged.
I don't know if there's any... Oh, there's one more, page 102, and I didn't see it again. Had to do with requiring charging stations in large developments.
Yes, so on page 103, the second bullet, it starts, new homes should be encouraged to include. The second sentence says, large residential developments should be required to have charging capacity for electric vehicles for each home.
I just don't see how that's should be dictated by the town.
Again, you're thinking dictated by the marketplace, right?
Dictated by the marketplace.
If everybody
That's
there
right.
who wants to have one, but if you're
Right.
putting in 15 of them and nobody uses them, what's the point?
It seems like an increase
part
in
of the
cost.
point is that when a large development is built, especially all at once, it can be difficult for the homeowners who buy into that to make that conversion to retrofit. So in Hinesburg, most of our developments are single-family homes. That's changing in the village area. But I'll use me as an example. So I moved into a condo complex in South Burlington, large building, a lot of people all living on top of each other. There's underbuilding parking, which is great, right? It minimizes surface parking and it's good. There's no way that anybody in that building, none of the 89 households could have an electric vehicle because the building wasn't built to accommodate that. And so I don't see Hinesburg getting buildings of that magnitude, but I see us getting somewhat smaller versions. And it would be unfortunate as we move to a more electric-based economy if these larger buildings aren't forced to wire up that way, you know, because once they build them they're not that way, it's very difficult to ever move in that direction.
So is there a difference between putting them in or making them
Yeah, I think you're
ready
right. I think you're
to be
right.
put in?
I think you're right. I think there is a difference between the way it's worded here, which is required to have charging capacity, versus being required to be ready for
shovel ready to put the appliance on?
Think about. I'm not really in favor of telling people what to do, but there are people who can see down the road, say, in 10 years, all cars are going to be electric. And some people are now saying, well, it's going to be faster than that. It's going to be in 5 years. So,
well, and it's not difficult to retrofit a single-family home.
No.
Like that. I don't know that we need to require that. But in these larger multifamily buildings, it can be really difficult if you don't.
Maybe
do
it's
it
a
up
matter
front.
of sorting out what type of building you're talking about,
well,
because
says
it only says.
large residential developments.
Well, when I think of a development, I think of Creekside.
Or maybe you fall back to what you did before, and you say encouraged. And leave it like that, because I don't think we are going to require anybody. It would be hard to zone that in.
Yeah, it's interesting. Through the Act 250 process, they are starting to require that in certain projects. But
Yeah, like we had to put one in.
Yeah, good point.
So are
At
we
the-
saying we would put that in our zoning?
yeah,
A certain
I mean,
size?
we have an energy and green building standard section in the zoning. I could see us someday having this in there, but maybe more specific about multifamily buildings or
because
projects over a certain number of units or something like that.
Well, large residential, isn't that imply it? Is it? Yeah.
I
Large
understand.
multi-residential.
I understand what it
developments.
means, but I
Yeah.
understand Tom's concern that it sounds like it's an obligatory thing.
So add the term multi.
Or do you put in some sort of technical language about density numbers or something like that?
Well, maybe what it should say, since we're trying to actually come up with what it should say now, and that's not what a plan does. A plan says go do this thing and figure it out. Maybe it should say develop requirements for
Yeah.
There you go.
the capacity to charge electric vehicles, in residential developments, and then it doesn't require anything except for us to think more about it.
And the detail would be in the zoning. If
Yeah,
the zoning
absolutely.
was actually changed, so we wouldn't want that here.
And then in the zoning, wouldn't it tie to, I guess it could tie to either something that we determine or some other standard of,
Potentially some other
some sort of state or
standard
federal
something.
standard
Yeah.
or something of the sort,
That
correct?
might come up, yep.
So is it all right if I just recouch that second sentence in that bullet to have us work on that as opposed to just require it right now?
Sounds like we've already started.
Okay. Tom, did you have, I think those were the ones you had. Did you have another one?
I think that was
Tom gave me a series of changes, and some I was like, happy to make those easy. And then a couple I said, I think your board's going to want to talk about those.
Yeah, that's fine. You got the typo one, I guess.
Yep.
Yep. No, I think that's all.
Okay. Good. I think that's it. That's the plan. There were a variety of changes in that very long and unwieldy table in chapter 10,
Yeah, I
but
noticed.
they're all just what you just talked about.
Reference what we just
I
went
also
through.
added a couple things to the glossary. I think Mike Bissonette had said you got some planner speak in there. Can you define it? And so I did. That's it.
So just a review of your steps, you're going to finalize this as, will it be called, it'll be a draft version, whatever, 10.
Yep.
And then...
It'll be titled the Select Board Proposal, actually.
Okay. And then we will warn the public meetings.
For August 31st and September 25th.
This will get posted out on the website.
Yep.
And you run an ad in the paper and
Yep, has
put
to
it
go
up
in the
all
Citizen
places
and
yep.
all the normal business, and then
Yep.
I'll try to do some sort of eye-catchy front porch forum series of posts to get people thinking about it again.
So just so we know, I have a app that tells me where I can plug my car in, and CVU has the only one listed as a place to plug in. So there are a couple other private places.
NRG?
There are, but they're not on a public
Oh.
sort of look. So
Yes,
but they are
someday
starting
it'd
to
be nice
pop
to get a
up
grant
everywhere.
to put one right behind in the parking lot behind
Right.
here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's the one.
If I can ever afford to buy an
CVS.
electric car, it'd be great
Oh,
to have
yeah.
one. Can't
Yeah.
afford one yet. So.
Most of them you just scan.
But
for
even
a
with all
buck
the
and plug
rebates?
in.
Even with all the rebates, yeah.
All right, thank you, Alex, for
Okay,
all your
thank
hard
you.
work. It really is an excellent plan. Plus it's got a lot of great graphics in it. and
right.
It's definitely.
So
Great.
Alex, are you doing the warnings for the public
Yes,
hearings?
I'll take care of all that.
All right.
Don't worry about it.
And as you do it, of course, send it to me and I'll do my thing as well.
Yeah, it all goes to you first, so it can be on the website when these notices appear.
Regular thing we always do. Yep. Very good. Thanks.
Thank you for your patience too.
You're welcome.
Actually, I thought the process went pretty well.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. It took a long time. It took longer than I would have liked. I will tell you honestly that there are other municipalities in which the select boards receive a proposal like this and largely say,
Looks good.
what was your process? Was it rigorous? Yes. Great. Could we quibble with, stuff on pages 10, 12, and 102? Yes, but we're not going to, and happens a little faster. But you're a very involved board, and you take it seriously, so it's all
Well,
good.
I mean, I think we set it up to that way by going chapter by chapter and,
But I think what he's saying is that other municipalities vest the power in the planning commission.
Yes, yes.
To a large degree.
Which- Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
If they feel like they have a planning commission that's worth vesting power
Right.
in, or they
Yeah.
believe in.
Which I would like to say that I very much value our planning commission and think it was a very good
Yes.
process. And I think it is reflected in that there are relatively few changes that we made.
Yeah,
And
it's-
so it is,
It
I
took
mean,
you a while to talk through it, but in the end, the number of changes you made were
Right.
Maybe 5.
mild.
Yeah.
Yeah. They do need an opportunity to look at it and provide comments, so you may, in fact, I think they're supposed to by statute, so there's probably going to be some kind of report from the planning commission on your changes. But.
Okay.
As in like just a memo from your office kind of a thing? Or?
Yeah, probably. It'll be on a planning commission agenda, and I'll walk them through the major changes, not the typos, and just see if they have anything they want to say about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, item 6 is the town administrator report. Renee?
All right. I guess first of all, giving an update. I think I've talked to a few of you about where we're at with the highway garage project and planning. I think the last meetings where you guys discussed that. CSWD had turned down or refused to look at the observatory road for various reasons. And so then we went back and you guys made the decision to go back to the original location that was on the plans, the lower site, and at the same time got agreement from CSWD that they would move forward with this project so it wasn't delaying anything. So we've hit some more roadblocks. The latest, it keeps sort of a moving target, but the latest is our existing well. And so the well that's been there since they came to our property, it's that they've been around. That was one of the issues that they had with the upper site, that they were in too close a proximity of one of the wells, the residential wells. And so that was one of the reasons why they wanted to move back to the lower site. And so at that time, this was several weeks ago, several meetings ago, I pointed out, so one of your reasons is the well. What about the well that you're right on top of right now?
They say they have a 100-foot buffer
100-foot
requirement.
Yeah, which I have pictures that, I mean, the well is actually right next to their little hut. So now to move forward, that well, they can't, if it's a drinking water source, which drinking water isn't just drinking water, but there's a shower and everything in the new garage facility, so washing hands, showering, and things like that is the same thing. So we need to have a well. Backing up earlier into the conversations in this whole planning process a year or two ago, that was a piece that we talked about is the well, and that we'd need to have a well on the site. So we talked about what the cost would be of drilling a new well, and we knew that was going to be a high cost with some risk, not knowing if the first drill is going to produce water. So we decided to test our existing well to make sure, to see if it was potable, and it turns out all our testing was it's potable water, so it was like that was a bonus that we weren't going to have to use that amount of the budget and the money towards a new well. So now we're here at the final stage where we should be moving forward, which we've been here several times. And so now their suggestion is that we drill a new well, or say that we're not going to use that for drinking water, which again, it's not just drinking. We've planned a shower, there's hand washing, there's an eye wash station. So this is a bit of a stumbling block, and our team is getting really frustrated. I mean, all of us, we've put a lot of time in it, but not just Andrea, Mike, and I. There's also our professional team that they've been working really hard, and I think I stated before, they've gone above and beyond and given us more than what they're charging for. So the frustration on them, I feel like I'm always having to apologize on behalf of another entity, because they're moving forward. They're wanting, like the purpose of this meeting today was supposed to be looking at the grading plans, and we should have been moving forward the Act 250 permit. We're wanting to get in hopefully in the next week or so. And this is...
So what's the next step?
So I think at this point, and you had left, but they'd like me to give them a deadline, and we need to know, are they in? Are they...
Well, I think one of the proposals that came forward, that Renee brought forward very well, was that they should maybe share in the cost of this new well.
And actually not even share it. I mean, how I brought it forward is...
Yeah, Renee brought it up, they should pay for it.
Right.
And it is really incumbent on them. They knew that well was there.
Right.
And, they just, it appears that they've kind of been dragging their feet in terms of doing their design. They just have not really put pen to paper. So, I mean, I'm, it is a solvable problem. right? There is the potential. What we don't know is what the cost of a well will be, and it's the actual cost, as the Mike Burke, the engineer working on this, is that the cost of the well is not so great. It's the permitting and the possible tests that have to happen. So yes, I think we should give them a deadline.
Like, the project team was thinking of like next Wednesday, so she's going to go back to her executive board. The executive board meets on Monday, and then the final decision would need to be by their regular board, which would be meeting Wednesday.
Right.
And so the thought is to have a decision by
Right.
Wednesday.
But I think what would be important for, possibly, I'm just putting this out there, is that we put together what the costs are, what we anticipate the costs are, so that there's a document coming from us that lays out what we see needs to happen. Because we don't know how.
But again, who does that legwork for them?
But
Like,
I think if we don't do it, then they could
Right.
say it's going to cost $50,000 for
But
the
I
well.
think we keep having that conversation, like, we keep having to do their legwork, and then we say, well, if we don't say that, then they're going to put this on the town, and at what point?
And then we do it, and then
And
they
then
find
then
out
there's-
another reason
then the
why
target's
they
moved
can't.
again. I mean, at what point?
It does
do we-
seem like we define to them that, this is new to us now. This well's always been there. This is new to us. Our estimate for a new well is X amount. And we probably should have representation at that meeting.
And we would like, yeah.
And so that we can present, our position. Otherwise,
I mean, we identified at what Mike Burke said, you're going to at least $10,000
yeah,
for a new well.
whatever we think it might be.
And so
Plus
that was
the testing
communicated
and
to
the
them.
risk.
And then anything above beyond that. But there's risk associated with that.
Right, of
Because
course.
it's not
So-
a known number.
Of course.
You have an estimate, but you don't know what you're going to hit.
But, I think if whatever our estimate is, 10,000 or more or less, whatever it is, we should give that to them clearly in writing.
Yeah.
And say, here, we've known the location of the well from day one. This is news to us. If we're required under your regulations to move the well, then the cost of a new well is this, and we feel that that cost should be your burden because this has been in the plan right along. That's it.
Period.
Give it to them.
Agreed.
And, we've delayed this project, it's costing us more, and any more delay is unacceptable, whatever.
I mean, what the project team, Steve Smith, would like to get this Act 250 permit submitted the week of August 2nd.
So I would put that in there. That we are submitting the Act 250 permit by August 2nd.
The other thing to note is we're only in this Act 250 process because of them. So if they're out,
Right.
this Act 250, all of this work, this is a 28-page application. And
It's
then
not
all
that
of the plans. There's
it
a
is-
lot of steps to it.
There's
It's
a lot of steps to it, but I think Steve has, it's pretty well taken care of.
There's still a lot that I've been doing on it today
Okay.
and the other
But
days.
the point
So
is it's unnecessary.
it's unnecessary.
Right, if we're not,
This is,
if it's
yeah.
not, yeah.
And all of these plans, so we've got our stormwater engineers, we've got Mike Burke doing his thing, Steve Smith. All of this work that they're doing, it's accommodating this,
Right.
all the different changes that they keep making. And so the look of frustration around that table today was, okay, now what do you want us to do? Do we wait?
So I hear there's frustration, but we
Yes.
have to keep moving forward.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I think
It's like a
that,
deadline is what
Yeah, I'd give
needs
them
to
a
happen.
fixed deadline. Yeah.
So what's your recommended deadline? Do we need a motion?
recommended deadline is next Wednesday.
Okay, so do we need a motion or just instruct the town administrator to say the deadline is this?
When is their meeting?
They have the executive board meeting on Monday, and their regular board is Wednesday. The regular board is the ultimate one that would be making the decision.
but I do think we should provide them some information, because if we don't do them do that, they will present it as, well, we don't know what the cost is, and it could
Right.
be 20,000, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess.
A summary.
10,000 is what we said today, but still, we don't know that. I mean, that number
No.
is an initial number, so
So
we
you
can
say
get that.
this is an estimate, and there's additional costs associated with testing and permitting.
Right.
And those would-
So,
If those would be borne by them, and if they want to pursue that, we need to know by
I think
Wednesday.
that's reasonable, yeah.
Okay.
And, get it in Sarah's hands.
Sarah Reeves.
Get
Yep.
it in her hands so she knows she's presenting it.
We've given them every option under the sun, including moving to somewhere where there was no well.
We
So
really
really,
have gone above and beyond.
Well, and I think, we could point out that we are, covering all the engineering costs for their grading and their stormwater.
Absolutely.
So, I think that's an important piece for their board to understand, is that we are pretty much giving them a permitted site.
We've also,
And,
today, we've just, because of the moving of the building, they won't necessarily need to be in a temporary location. They can stay
Right.
where they are through most of the construction. So that's another huge cost savings for them.
That's worth repeating. We're considering moving the building
We
to
would-
accommodate them, to which further illustrates our commitment to them and their service. And what I'm looking for is whether they're committed to Hinesburg.
Right.
And
there's
right
question.
now, I'm not feeling that they are,
Right.
and that they're not, for whatever reason, willing to stand up and say what their position is.
Right.
Truthfully.
So if we understood
what
what their budget for, they've been throwing out some numbers of what their budget is for building their facility, but we don't really know whether that included their needing to get a stormwater permit and all of that. And so I think if we can kind of provide a narrative of all of the work that we're doing to give them a permitted site, that their board will understand that maybe their costs are
Significantly
less
smaller,
than,
yeah.
that they've been estimating,
Right.
and therefore they can cover the cost of this well.
Right,
It's a very significant point.
yeah.
And if we can, someone from the committee to be at that meeting to, articulate what's, this information, I think would be helpful, if that's possible. Well, that's disappointing.
It's very disappointing, very frustrating, and like I said, this project team, all of them, have worked very hard, have gone above and beyond on this, and, everyone's been taking their time. Andrea, this is the height of your working season. You've been taking your time to come to these meetings. He's 2 people this week, and he has a lot of work. He's been making an effort to come to these meetings, Steve. Everybody's going above and beyond, and it is frustrating. So,
Is there anything else?
I think I mentioned a few of you, so the ongoing saga with the union negotiations. I think the last time I said I thought I had a guy named Vinny, and then apparently then it became back to Wendy, who's I thought was just the person that kind of coordinates things there. And so she was going to meet with me this week, and then she went on vacation, and apparently while she was on vacation, Vinny resigned, and he was already gone before she came back. So the next person doesn't start until August 7th, and she got moved over, so she now can't be our rep. So now it'll be the next person, and they don't start till August 7th. And that's just when they start at the position.
Is our union employees concerned?
They don't appear to be concerned at all. There haven't been any big issues. Actually, they really wanted to just get it over with me, and they tried to get the union to agree to, let's just do this, we're comfortable with this, but then...
So
they turned
Renee,
that
just
down.
the bottom line that Renee said, it really isn't on us, and we're okay in
Yeah.
this position. It's delaying, this agreement, which is unfortunate, but, we're just still,
Yeah.
we'll be patient and work with them and hopefully get through it.
So we just act on their existing contract, but it's a pretty small group. Everybody,
And
we're
everybody's
doing
in
fine.
the know. It sounds like everybody's in the know.
Everybody's in the know. In fact, Wendy contacted the shop steward today, and so they
Thank you.
have the latest update. I think I had written a note to you guys about the Vermont Alert System, the one that we had the presentation for.
Yeah.
That really is an important tool for us, and it's something that we really, really need. And Al was here with you guys, I don't know if it's been a few months ago, and he talked about that and said that he would organize to have a presenter come and present about it. So that was what that step took place.
So I wrote to Al and Frank and said, just give us your recommendation on, which I'm assuming they'll say, let's move ahead.
Al did reply back,
Yeah.
and he said, absolutely, that's
So
important.
I think with that recommendation, maybe, at a follow-on meeting, we
Yeah.
can, make a motion if we agree that we want to pursue this, and then it'd be up to the town to put together that committee, I guess, to
Right.
be trained and decide, which optional pieces or how we would apply it.
Yeah, and as what Randy had stated when he did the presentation, so it's a free service to the municipality. It's federally funded.
Yeah, but you can bet we will be paying for this sometime in the future.
That's why I think, you sort of start off small and say, well,
Right.
here are the three
Right.
things we
Yeah.
want to use it for, like notifying when the water
Yeah.
goes down.
I think for us, because we're such a small, bare bones staff, this is a tool. This is what I was looking for something to try to, inform residents, inform businesses when we have these water breaks. And there's a whole host of things that we can do this, and it's a quick, it gets it out immediately. So it would be very helpful.
Sounds like it.
All right, so we'll put that on a
So do you
upcoming
need us
meeting.
to do anything, or is that?
Nope. I think if we get it on the meeting, you guys approve it, then we can write that letter, and
Yeah,
then that gets it in motion, because then there's still training that has to take place and things
So for
like
me,
that.
it was just to get, and Al and Frank don't even have to come, I don't think. Just let them say they're in agreement with this, you're in
Yeah.
agreement
Yeah.
with it, so seems like,
And then we will be formally when we,
Right, yep. So,
there it is.
and then in addition to, when I did your email on Friday and gave you kind of the rundown of this meeting and then upcoming things. So for the next week's meeting, which is going to be just budget specific for water, wastewater, we also, the RFPs are due back the day before for the lease financing. So I'd like you to formally award the bid on that night. That would be a quick thing. And then the engagement letter for our auditing firm, we're going to stick with for an additional year. And so it'll just be and that's another just a 5-minute type of thing. It's something you've done each time. So.
But we are going to go out for quotes.
no, I think.
Next time.
Next
I mean,
time,
Next
so we
time.
have to put
Yes.
that, well, I think we have to figure, we should know when that's going to happen.
So I have some templates already for RFPs, and so the next one after this lease financing that I'll put forth is the legal services RFP, and then I think once we do that one, then we can do the audit and
Sounds good.
get that going.
Yeah.
So those are things that Trevor's helped me on too. The Baldwin Road intersection, when do you want to bring that back?
So we have we asked for a review, we
Yeah.
have that in hand.
Yeah, you
Have
had
we
Tyler came and
have we
he
seen
did the
that?
presentation on
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
I'm trying to remember.
I think so,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then, so we're looking whether or not to act upon it or not.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the thought was if you did act upon it and you did decide to do that section of paving, it would be good to tie it in to the paving projects
Which
that
is
are coming up.
in third week of August, I think?
Yeah.
So
somewhere
there's
in
our
August.
answer as to when we should put that on
So-
the agenda. Sounds like next.
Right. So that would have to be your August 3rd
Yep,
meeting.
yep,
You want to do that?
yep.
Okay.
I assume that's enough time if we go ahead with this, for paving to happen and Mike to work out any particulars.
It's, I mean, something we'd want to make a front porch forum
Yeah.
post, you know, put it on the
No, I'm
website.
saying like if we do agree to do
Oh.
this, right?
Yep,
that Mike can, there's
Enough
still
time
enough
for
time,
Mike.
for Mike to coordinate with the paving
right,
company.
yep. And then we have also the money from Vermont Gas that would go toward it too.
Right.
So, yep.
Yeah.
And so I will put that on for the August 3rd. The hazards mitigation plan, that's just a simple, it's the resolution thing, so we can put that on any of the upcoming meetings. And we've already talked about the town plan public hearings. So I think that was the main thing. There's a couple issues from, there's a trucking company that would like to discuss the overweight permit fines. And so he's asked to come before the board at some
When
point.
you say discuss, does that mean he,
They were fined,
they're
they
looking
were
to
hit
have
with a
that-
fine, and they just want to make sure you're aware of what those fines are. I did talk to Caleb about that. Caleb, and the guy said that he'd talked to Caleb. Caleb was, you know, very appreciative. He was appreciative of Caleb's time, but and Caleb explained that that's in state statute as far as the
so are
amount
they
of the
looking
fines.
to give us feedback on the process, or are they
I
looking
think
to ask for the fines to be removed?
They were feeling that they were too high for
So
what
that's for
the.
them to be lowered, perhaps.
I
Maybe,
don't.
you don't know.
I don't know
Yeah.
that he's going to
Yeah.
ask for that specifically. I think he just wants to make sure that the select board is aware of what those fines are and the impact they have to trucking companies. So,
I think if that happens, it would be good to get an update, I guess, from Caleb or
Caleb
whoever.
would come for
Just-
that, I would
Yeah,
make
he would
sure.
be the one.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
He could either come or just give us a short explanation of, you know.
I think it'd be helpful
So-
to have him there because
Okay.
he's the one that has the knowledge of that.
Yep.
And he could speak to it. And then another resident that's on CB Road that, and it's a private road, but he's thinks that the town should do some work to replace the culvert on their private road because he feels that it's damaging Lincoln Hill Road, and so it's a huge expense for
Or Lincoln Hill Road is damaging his culvert.
something of the effect. I think it's a 3-foot culvert that's in between 2 4-foot culverts.
So I think maybe Mike or somebody could give us a
Yes,
recommendation on this.
Mike would
yeah.
definitely give you.
It'd be good, I
Some
think, if
information.
Mike could write down what he sees as the issue
Uh-huh.
And a recommendation.
and a recommendation. And
Okay.
it's.
Rather
we-
than having Mike come to
I mean, he
me
can
or-
come too, but I think if we
right.
have that information ahead of time, we
Okay.
can go look at it ourselves.
Right.
We can understand it and speak about it and.
Okay.
Who owns the other two, the 4-foot culverts? Are those
The town, they're on the town, on Lincoln Hill Road, I think. Is my understanding? I believe so.
Is this from recent storms?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, so it took out the end of CB Road, apparently, other than that, their culvert. And then the next upcoming thing is the FY19 budget development process timeline. And
last year?
what's that?
Did we do that last year already?
I know, why would we need to do it again? So, and I think bringing all of the boards and committees back in for mission statement review, I think would be good. And all of that, so that's all I had.
Okay, any other questions or? Next item is select board forum.
So I have one, and I don't want to get into too depth of discussion tonight, but I think now that we're in the hiring process for town administrator, I would like to see us in the near future explore the option of town manager again. I think just in the last few weeks, we've seen what goes on a daily basis. And our job is to provide the most efficient service to the townspeople, and I don't think every other week meeting is providing that. I think we need somebody in the front office we trust who can make these decisions. You know, we've talked about before, become a policy board, set forth our policy, give the marching orders, and let our paid staff go for it.
Came up several times during this meeting.
Yep, it has. And I think we should discuss it again, gearing up toward town meeting day for another vote.
Are we thinking agenda item at an upcoming meeting?
I would say so if we can find the time.
Yep.
We might want to plan one out a little bit, and because I imagine if we were to do this, we would want to get some input from people and hear sort of the pluses and minuses, which I think happened the last time. But from that, have the board make a decision one way or the other to move forward with this or not.
Mm-hmm.
So you're thinking of September?
Maybe toward the end of September, beginning of October, because we
have
got till
time
town
to
meeting.
talk about it.
And this will give people time to sort of, discuss it and
Organize
it would,
thoughts,
yeah, and it would be good to
data.
get, I think there's different people in town that wouldn't mind 5 or 10 minutes giving us their opinion one way or the other.
So you have one regular meeting in September is the 18th.
Right.
The other one's the public hearing.
Andrea, your thought on that, or
Fine.
Marilee?
Yes, I'm in favor of exploring that, but I also want to say we are on the time of our agenda today only because the public hearing took 1 hour rather than 2, and this happens all the time. So I'm really concerned that we're only meeting once. Do I have that right? Only once in September?
We're meeting twice now. We added an extra meeting.
Yeah, but that's an open meeting about the town plan, so that's not when we're going to do business. We just need to meet more often. I think it's really not productive to have meetings that go till 11. I know that after 2 hours of meeting, not just me, but people in general get tired and not as efficient. And I just, I think it would be better if we met more often.
I think one thing you do need to take into consideration on the other end of that is select board meeting weeks take a lot more on this end as far as preparation and getting things ready, because you don't stop the other work that's happening and the other things that are walking in the door, and then you're also having to do all the prep work for the select board meetings and making sure things are in your packets and giving you enough information and setting up the room, and there's just a lot to that. So,
Which speaks to the whole town manager, town administrator role.
right.
Well, yes, it does, but it also, I think it's more than that.
Sure, absolutely.
It's more just, broader organizational stuff. I don't think
Agreed.
it's just one position.
No, I agree.
Okay.
Well, one way we could address this is similar to what we did today, is we did add another meeting. We said,
Yeah.
let's do that, and maybe it's, not broadly scheduling them, but taking a look ahead and saying, you know what, in October, we're gonna have to add another meeting, because particularly when we have those special events, for me, it feels good to let's just get, do that, even if it's a different day, just to get through that. And then the regular meeting nights are really just select board items.
If you look into October, we're getting into the budget season, and so it's going to be more often meetings. We end up meeting weekly or so, and then we do that for a long period of time up until town meeting. So you gotta think about what the commitment is for everyone.
So I think in a way we're kind of we'll continue to take a look ahead, and because I agree, going to 11 o'clock is a little bit too late.
And I think if you're basing that on the July 6th meeting and the June 8th meeting, those were the only regular scheduled business meetings for those times, and so we had to put a lot of information on that, because today was supposed to be just the focus of the public hearing.
It's true,
So,
but Marilee's point is well
Absolutely,
taken. That's
absolutely.
definitely the
I've
trend.
only been going to this meeting since March,
Uh-huh.
and there's only been one that's ended before 10.
right,
So
Yeah.
it's normal that they end at 10:30 or 11,
yeah.
or
And
11:30.
there's probably other efficiencies that can happen to move things.
Is there any other select board forum items? So I have one. So, it's clear that everybody on the select board is basically championing a project or two. We have the town garage, we have the new hire process, the rec stuff, and at this point I've sort of fallen into the water and wastewater stuff, so I'll continue to do that through this permitting process and through the issues associated with the water. And it might be good to somehow periodically, maybe prior to meetings, if anyone has information they want to share, a simple email that nobody needs to respond to just before the meeting saying, here's an update on where we are, information only, and then if there's a comment or a question in our meeting, but then we'll kind of know sort of what everybody's doing in the background. And, this could be a a regional planning thing if you want to mention something. Rather than doing it here at Select Board Forum, if it is only information, try to get that out and certainly copy Renee on it, but it's just information only prior to a meeting. Just a thought.
It's very good.
Because I thought of that, sort of updating everybody on the water wastewater thing would have been a good thing to do. Anything else on?
Yeah, so I think the committee that we had initially appointed way back should we let those people know that we're not going to have a committee? Or we're awaiting figuring out the issue with the state? But those people, Aaron did send something to them, but it might be, so what's our decision here? Are we saying that we're not going to have the committee?
My thought was, and partially in sending that out, aside from letting people who have an interest in know specifically, is to acknowledge that we did appoint and create this committee, but we haven't met.
Right.
Because like you said, I don't think any of us here has really said anything formally that, hey, we're not meeting for X, Y, and Z reasons. So it was to acknowledge that they are still a committee. But I'm glad you bring this up, because what is our long-term plan with this committee? And if they are going to do something, could they be looking at whatever that is now? There's time right now. And what is it that we formed the committee for? Is that still necessary? I think it is, but has it changed? Has it shifted a little bit?
Well, I don't think it's really shifted, because I think it's basically we're trying to answer some unknown questions at this point. So who do we want thinking about that? Is it just the five of us, or do we want to?
I think the answer to that was the committee, right? So
right.
As they're the work.
So maybe
group.
if we are getting any presentations, or we should bring them up to speed on.
Absolutely.
I was hoping that I'm glad Rob came.
Yeah.
And Peter, because both of those people had been, bring them up to speed on what we learned tonight.
It would be great to see the committee meet
So we
once.
should, yeah.
At least,
So
especially
maybe
out of
that's
this.
something that you and I were on that committee, you and I can deal with, and that it's not
Tell me.
on, oh, you, okay.
I just took the initiative
Okay.
to send the email. That's all. But I could.
There were some specific goals of the
Yeah.
committee, so
Right.
it might not be a bad idea. I kind of was taken back about, where we are on water capacity
Yeah.
in the last meeting we had, so my expectation is we'll get through that and have some capacity, which we don't presently have in our pocket. So I think, I would think the committee could go forward, assuming the capacity we had prior to the water leakage will return, and there'll be a little bit to give out
Yeah.
beyond what's already been allocated. And,
But I think part of it was we were going to do some background and.
Yeah.
yeah,
so
how
we could
other
start-
people are doing it.
Yeah,
Yep.
so we could do that.
Number
All right.
crunching and analysis and kind of research. Stuff that you don't do in a meeting like this.
Right. Well, why don't I take a stab at writing something and pass it by you, Tom? And that way, I mean, we don't need to put more on your plate, Renee, and we'll see if we can't.
Because you have time
At
right
least,
now. There's time, since there isn't, I mean, beginning of May, we appointed the committee, you know?
I think it was longer ago than that, but
But
whatever.
nevertheless, yeah. Yeah,
It would be
it's-
good leading up to that if we have some kind of an update about the well proposal
Yep.
from Haystack.
I
I'm
would
not sure
think
where
that
is, but-
yeah, that's sort of out there too.
Yeah.
There's been some back and forth on that.
Yeah.
You know, we might be 2 or 4 weeks away.
Yeah, I mean, we're planning to meet again next week, and so it's moving forward. It's making progress anyway.
So the only thing that would do is potentially add capacity.
Well, it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
what we need at this
That's-
Yeah.
that's
But
an
it's
issue.
still limited. There's not enough out there. So either way, the committee ideally comes up with, here's a reasonable process to allocate capacity. I mean, that's the overall goal. Anything else on select board form? All right, consider approving the minutes for July 6th. Is there a motion?
I can make that motion for you.
Second.
Any comments? They were in our packet.
I don't think I saw anything when I went through it.
They looked okay to me.
Yeah.
Shall we vote?
Yeah, I'm good with that. I saw one thing, but it's.
All those in favor of approving the minutes from July 6th, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Andrea, did you?
Yes, I did vote,
Okay.
aye.
All right, and consider approving the warrants that are here
So moved.
Second.
and seconded.
They're there on the table.
Yep. I think they've been reviewed internally. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any other items to discuss? We're only 5 minutes late. That's pretty good. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes, there is.
And a second?
Sure.
All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.